get out of the today. So I did not say that very well. Sorry. We added this just a few minutes ago, so I'm trying to think through it as I thought. It's not always awesome. All right. So what we're going to do is, if you can grab a couple Post-it notes and a pen on your tables. The first person at the table got to choose the color. So just if you don't like the color, you can play that person. And if you're online, do we have folks online? Just checking in. Okay. So the folks online just probably grab a piece of paper or something close to you, because we are going to check the hybrid system here that they can share into the room. So on your Post-it note, if you were here yesterday, this is not working very well, is it? Here we go. I'll try this. If you were here yesterday, we put a lot of stuff on poster paper and poster boards and all of that. I think as a team, we were shocked about how much information we were able to gather. So if you were here yesterday, thinking of all that stuff we put up yesterday, the conversations we had, what is one key takeaway that you have from yesterday? That could be just a aha. That could be something that you want us to focus on as a council and as an agency on that. So if you were here yesterday, think about the biggest point that you want to make, and you're going to share it out. You can pass if you really don't want to, but you're going to share it out, and then we'll collect these just so we don't lose this information. If you weren't here yesterday, if you can go ahead and just say one thing that you hope to get out of today. So we asked that question when we kicked off the meetings yesterday. If you're on virtual yesterday and in person today, go ahead and just think about what that aha from yesterday was. So I'll give you just a minute to do that, and then I'll do some more instructions here in just a minute. Sally, can you just go to that mic? All right. And just sound check for hybrid. Is it working? You guys are hearing it fine? Good. All right, awesome. And those of you folks online, please do just put in the chat if it gets echoey or you're having a hard time hearing us, let us know and we can adjust on that. So the next phase here, we're going to go ahead and we'll start with this table just because it looks like you're done. We'll do some introductions, so just your name, what agency you work for, and if you're on the council, and then your aha. So we're going to try to do this relatively quickly, so like that 30-second elevator speech about your aha from yesterday or what you're looking to get out of today. So actually I'll start. I guess I'm also Youth Development Oregon Associate Director. On that big aha I had out of yesterday was, I think we were ready for that conversation. It felt like people wanted to have the conversation and really brainstorming some ideas. So I'll turn it over to Bill.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Bill Hansel. I am the grant manager and data lead with YDO. I think the aha moment for me was when we were using an equity lens. And it dawned on me that temporal ordering is important. So like when you ask or when you use the equity lens is important, and because it will determine the answers as opposed to coming up with answers and then asking the question, who does it impact? Like you can actually do that in the development of those things. So that was kind of my aha moment.
My name is Ibrahim Aganya, YDO, grant manager and operations analyst. And the thing I kind of took away from yesterday, I think, was everybody being open, by that being willing to learn and just understand. And he came into with that mindset, I think, in the room, which I really appreciate.
Baby Lewis. Good morning, everyone. One kind of two-pronged aha. The first one is really I'm comfortable that many of the aspects of the strategic plan are being met, so that felt good. And then I felt that I think our equity dialogue, while we are having it, I think we still aren't as comfortable as I think we can be.
Hi, Jenny Glass. I'm with the San Francisco Federal Reserve and a hopeful new member of the council. And, you know, as a new person, just kind of jumping into this and not really knowing the depth of the work of YPO. Just super impressed with you all and the dedication of the small staff team and looking forward to contributing and making connections working.
Hi, I'm Juliet Mackin, NPC Research. I am a partner with the YDO, providing evaluation and technical support. And one of the things that really stood out for me yesterday was the potential or need or benefit of the role of YDO as a connector and a partner in terms of reaching out partnerships, collaboration to really reach those goals and reach the impact because of being a small group and because of having connections in so many different arenas and having that opportunity, but the need for partnership. And I think that came out in a lot of the conversations I was part of yesterday.
Team says it's not on.
My name is Janelle Theobald. I'm on the council representing youth, and I think the biggest takeaway is just that the extent of there are so many different problems that are all like like so many different priorities and problems you're trying to solve, and it's kind of encouraging that you've done so much already, but there's also still a lot that we have left to do.
Hi everyone, my name is Kim Le. My day job is an immigration attorney out in Clackamas County. I am also a hopeful council member. My aha yesterday stemmed from two different boards. One of the boards said, who holds the power and like how do we see that changing? And then another board said something to the extent of, we want to increase youth membership in the council. We want to diversify our membership. And I thought, wow, that's great because we are actually doing something about it. We're not just talking about who has the power and being like, oh, okay, that's so sad. But I can see that this council is trying really hard to make sure that others get a voice and that power dynamic is taken into consideration when considering other members. So that was amazing.
Being Theobald, Janelle's mom, since I need to drop her off to the meeting, so I attend all of your meetings. I know that you have done a lot, great jobs, and it's very important for your job. And we both, Janelle and I, learned a lot. I think something stood out for me yesterday is see those great activities and with those dots like mark the importance of the future task. I see many of you have the same vision and like a lot of them like tasks need to be done stands out. I think it's a great activity and also see where he sees vision to including more youth to hear their voice. That's fantastic. Yeah, great job.
Good morning, Jeff Parker. I'm the Executive Director of Northwest Youth Corps and a council member in my second term, somewhere in my second term, not sure exactly where that is. My two takeaways, one, again, the need and desire for greater youth voice in the decision-making process. And then the other thing that I've been thinking about overnight was the role that YDO can play as a convener, and as opposed to recreating or creating new stuff, is let's go find the best that's out there and then let's make connections and leverage that. And there are great big gatherings of youth. Let's go to them instead of having them come to us.
Good morning. I'm sorry I couldn't be here yesterday. I'm Sandra Giroux, also in my second term as a YDC council member and a Benton County Commissioner. I would love to see a path forward defining research collaboration and thinking about evaluation of outcomes, both with respect to engagement of youth and also all the equity issues that we talked about here, and making use of the data that we collect. And think about how we can do that without taking away from the actual work, but trying to do it integrated with the work in a thoughtful and strategic way. And I'm really excited about being here with all of you in person because it's been a while.
Morning, everyone. Jared Shaw, Grant Manager and Workforce Analyst. And what really stood out to me yesterday was just the strength that we have in numbers, just when we collaborate and when we think together, when we generate ideas together. There were some really insightful things that were said, and it was just powerful to see what we can do together when we put a whole bunch of brains together, what you come up with. So it was great.
Who has a table?
Yeah, do your table and. Sorry.
All right, great. Hi, I'm Corp Bucher, Deputy Director for Youth Development Division, YDO. I was just counting how many photographs of pages of notes I have from the end of the day yesterday, and I mean, my thought is just how do I and the team, how do we make something useful and get clarity from the abundance of ideas and goals and questions that came out, and just find a balance between the richness and the creativity and also giving back something that folks can then use to move forward in planning. So just kind of wrestling with that, but it's really exciting to have so much to work with. So it'll be a fun exercise.
Morning, everyone. Liz Thorne, she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Matchstick Consulting in my day job, and then YDC council member, YDO council member. I think two takeaways for me. I think by the end of the day yesterday, my brain just felt like it was kind of swimming. Like when we were in the sticky dot activity, I was just like, I don't even know where to put my dots. Okay, so I think that there was just there's so many ideas, there's so many opportunities, and there's so many challenges. And so for me, like this idea of synergy in action, like where are the things that are, like folks have already said, where are the things that are already happening that we can support? And then how do we get behind our really clear priorities and have some actionable movement forward on them? That's kind of where I've been sitting. I'm also getting over a head cold, so I'm also on student ed, so that could also be playing into my swimming brain feeling yesterday.
Hi, I was online yesterday, so nice to see you all in person. Julia Alpernis, Director of Procurement, and just attending to learn and listen, see where you're headed, so I can help my team and support the goals in a much timelier fashion, hopefully. I mean, I heard a lot of passion and excitement to the challenges, and to challenge like status quo and find different paths and methods to do stuff. So that was exciting. So
Hi everyone, I'm Jerry Snyder. It's great to meet you all. Unfortunately, I wasn't here yesterday, but I'm happy to be here today. I think what I'm looking forward to most is just hearing everyone's perspective, just kind of learning a little more. I think it's always interesting to hear things and just kind of see how people view issues from an equity lens. So I think that's kind of what I'm mostly looking forward to hearing today.
All right, and so when I'm transitioning up here, you'll see that there's a parking lot. So we don't want you to feel like you have to put your ahas up with it, but if you would be so kind and feel comfortable with it, when we take a break, just to put your little post-it note up there so we capture that.
Good morning. Adrienne Livingston, I'm council. I am with World Venture as the Director of Anti-Sex Trafficking Initiatives and really trying to help our middle and high school girls not be trafficked. And I can already tell the collective just energy in the room that is so different from Zoom. And so I'm sad that I was not able to be here yesterday. So really today, I've already just been listening. I just, I feel definitely actually coming in I heard how yesterday was just wonderful. And I'm looking forward to that in the conversation today, listening and hearing different ideas, perspectives. Definitely, I do come with an equity lens. So just, yeah, I'm just excited to have the conversations, and I see the lightning man, so yeah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Marisol Ortega, YDC Chair. Similar to Jeff, I think the thing that stood out the most was like not reinventing the wheel, right? Like we have a lot of these, we have access to a lot of these partnerships. I think we just need to strengthen them. And also understanding like certain issues maybe need our involvement, but we maybe aren't the people to lead. And so, yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Christina McMahon. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm in the twilight of my first term as a council member. I don't know exactly like you, Jeff. I don't know exactly when that ends, but I am in my day job, the Clackamas County Juvenile Department Director. Yesterday, so I find it what Adrian just said really, as coming in after not having been here, I was driving home thinking about what an amazing day it was and how in my job I have to go to a lot of meetings, and I can't lie, I don't enjoy them all, even if they are in person. And yesterday, I was just thinking about all the ways I get to interact with everybody here and just how amazing that was and how this group is really different and different than any other group that I'm involved in that involves government entities. So I had a couple of aha moments. One of them was related, people have already touched on this, the youth voice aspect of it, but not just, there was a lot when I was going around the room looking at the sheets, not just about, oh, we need to get more youth on the council or in our youth committee. It was really about, as Jeff mentioned, how do we go to them? How do we, somebody brought up a great idea about inviting guests. And it really got me thinking about how do we set the table in a way that leads to real inclusion and really giving young people a chance to be heard in a meaningful way. So that's got my wheels spinning. The other aha moment I had, I thought it was so amazing and so beautiful because in these government structures that I have lived in, a career bureaucrat here, I try not to act like one though, but I slip into it from time to time. What I thought was amazing is this moment towards the end of the day when a member of our council spoke up and said, hey, wait a minute, we've worked hard all day and you're only gonna give us 10 minutes to allocate our measly 18 dots. I think it was 18 altogether, depending on how you count the colors, but and it was just so great because normally I'm used to being in meetings and systems where we've got an agenda, this is what we're gonna do, it's very top down, it's prescribed. And with this group, the leadership from the state agency, and the folks that are the staff are like, yeah, okay, let's revisit that. We need to honor that and think about that. And it was really responsivity and action. And I thought that was great. And I thought, wow, if more of my meetings were like this, I might like them better. Anyway, thanks.
Molly Rogers, and I'm on the council. I think I'm in my second term. I'm a little disappointed because Christina promised me banana splits at 3 o'clock yesterday, and then she told me it wasn't true. So, no, there was a lot yesterday. What I really think people have said, I echo lots of what was said. But I think I'm gonna talk about the fact that it was relaxed. I'm getting feedback, I'll see if I can move over. Relaxed enough that we made it our meeting and that we ran with it our way, because there were times that we were ahead of the agenda and there were times that we needed that amount of time. And so I'm gonna echo what Christina said, is that it was time for us and we made it ours. And that felt really good yesterday. And it felt shared, both in power, but also shared in just respect for the moment. So that was my aha.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Schoonover. I'm with the Youth Development Division as the state's compliance monitor. I haven't been around much. A lot of you I'm meeting for my first time. I spent most of this year traveling, catching up on site visits. So it's nice to be here and meet you guys. And yesterday it was really nice to see how passionate everybody is with this work. And it was also exciting to see like all of us come together with ideas on how to move forward and progress.
Good morning, I'm Anya Sikin, the Associate Director of the Youth Development, Oregon. I will save the aha moment for later. Right now, I'm gonna do ha 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 moment. I'm just so thrilled, honestly. I don't think I can stop smiling. Just from seeing people I haven't seen for so long and seeing people for the first time in person that I've seen on the screen. And they're real. I could touch Catherine. You know, they're just like, oh my goodness, I always wanted to meet you. And now I do. And I'm so thrilled to see new people. And I hope you're not getting discouraged from joining us. I'm just like, I have plans for you, so you know. And I'm so glad that Jillian's mom is here with us because this is like the, what do I put it? It's a natural family engagement that we're just witnessing here. It wasn't staged, it just happened. And I'm so glad that you're here and you're participating, you're sharing your thoughts. Thank you for that. Now, the aha moment. I don't remember who, but somebody in this group said something like super smart yesterday. Not that other things were not smart, they were like super smart. But something that we could use, I think. And to follow up what Julia was saying, the connecting role that this YDO as together as a council and staff play. Why do we need to put together a youth summit of our own? There are youth summits happening. Why don't we make a presence there? You know. So whose idea was that? Well, I just thought that maybe that person knows where people gather. So maybe we'll gather, you know, sort of a map of where these things are happening and dedicate. We're probably taking turns, you know, staff member, council member, just to go and visit and talk about what we do and what we could do collectively. So that was a hot.
Thank you, Anya. Brian Detman, and Director of Youth Development Oregon. It's great to see everybody. Good to see some new faces who are here today and who were able to make it yesterday. Aha moment is, many things resonated. I've heard perhaps about council members who are interested in engaging in some more direct ways. I don't know that there's an answer, like a straight show up on this date and this thing, but the number of site visits that grant managers do, and to Anya and other points around like youth gatherings, and there was a 4-H gathering that we were able to send a staff member to, a tribal youth summit that we sent a staff member to, and our own community engagement efforts. Those are all opportunities where we would, and council members showed up to a meeting in this very space about a year ago to attend and hear what various community stakeholders had to say. But it just, the aha sort of reminder for me is, how do we continue to share the information and let you know that you're not just invited, but like encouraged, because there are these examples of us organizing things or convenings that we've organized for our grantees that you're welcome to be at and attend, and we just need to build maybe either stronger connections, share more information. I don't know exactly the right answer, but there's lots of things that ways that your voice in those spaces and presence matters, and so we'll continue to work on that.
I'm Sally Dyke, Grant Manager and Future Ready Analyst.
My hope for yesterday totally came to fruition. Getting to see the expertise in this room and the synergy between folks who maybe haven't had time to really connect in person, and the potential new folks and the energy that they bring to the room, just feels so powerful, frankly, that as staff, we have daily logistics that we are gonna work on and do. And so the kind of the role that council members can play in shaping some of that on a high level is exciting to get to be part of. And then to see the synergy that happened yesterday was really great. So I don't know if it was an aha, because I was really looking for it and hoping for it. And just to see that was really great. Can I pass the mic to you and not squeal?
Behind this recycling thing.
Hello, Tanisha Bishop, YDO Youth Administrative Specialist, Youth Grant Administrative Specialist, excuse me. My takeaway is that it's the end of the 2023 YDO strategic planning, and it's also the beginning of lots of changes, positive work, and opportunity for the youth of Oregon.
Everyone, Melissa Galardo, Executive Support Specialist for YDO. My aha moment, I don't know if it really counts as an aha moment because it happens every time, but I get just reinvigorated and so by being with all of you, all of the passion and hearing all of the ideas and the dedication to the work that you do. So it's really an honor to do this work that I do. And I also was remembering that idea that someone mentioned yesterday, going to where the youth are. And that made me think of taking this opportunity to plug our December 14th quarterly council meeting, which is going to be at McLaren. We're going to be able to join Kiwi and Andy there, our youth members who sometimes have a hard time joining us. So just a reminder that we'll see you again there on the 14th, I hope. Thank you. And then we have Janine online.
Perfect.
Hello, can folks hear me?
Yeah, give us 1 second. Joy,
Okay.
can you?
Hey, Janine, are you there? I am. Can folks hear me? I can't hear you guys anymore, but I can hear you. I'll just type it in the chat. We can hear you. All right, thank you. Thanks, everyone. This is Janine Hartley. I am calling in from the Umpqua Valley. Thank you for being flexible and allowing me to join in electronically. I am a council member and also an administrator at the Douglas ESD down here. And my aha yesterday was just, even though I've been on the council for quite a bit of time, but learning just how we can integrate within the state agency ecosystem, and then how we can leverage that to elevate YDO's work around the state. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Molly Burns, Grant Manager, Re-engagement Analyst. That's my new title. Yesterday was really fantastic. The engagement, creativity, passions, and ideas. And, you know, and there's a lot of work that we have to do together and with partners. And seems that there's a lot of excitement and energy in doing that work. Thank you.
So that was so appreciate the adjustment, the comments around adjusting the agenda. This was something we had and we felt it was important to make sure that we got that voice in the room. So I don't envy Sally and Brian's task coming up, but as we move into the lightning rounds, like I said, we have the parking lot for your kind of key takeaways for us to capture that. And I'll put it out there because they're going to cut you off on these next lightning talks. is we have parking lots for each of the four each of the four lightning talks posted in the back. So you have post-it notes here, just fair warning. I'm assuming these guys are probably gonna cut you off at some point with lightning talks. They're shaking their heads. So use those post-it notes to make notes for further conversation at lunch around the four lightning talk conversations. And then when we take breaks, just post it up there and then we'll put them on the tables for conversations during lunch. All right, I think I'm officially done, right? I'm done. It's on. You got it there?
We are gonna do lightning talks for this next section, and quick show of hands, has anyone been part of lightning talks before? Okay, great. Almost everyone, this is new and it doesn't matter how it goes. So maybe you're just gonna keep our secret. What we are hoping for is that staff will be able to present information, and following that brief presentation, there will be a robust discussion among council members about what the action steps could be, should be. There will be some leading questions at the end of each presentation to kind of forge where we're headed. And the intention is for council members to be in discussion with each other, recognizing again the expertise and experiences that y'all bring to the room, and hoping to highlight those and really have an opportunity for us to build on that. We expect the conversations to be pretty dynamic, and that it is going to be frustrating to have to stop and move to the next topic, so I apologize now. But that is why we have parking lots, and they're by topic. And so you'll have the opportunity to make sure that we can return to the conversation and make sure that everything that needs to be brought to light today will be. At lunch today, we'll have another opportunity to kind of break up by table and delve a little bit more deeply into the conversations that you want to be sure to be part of. Anything else I need? There will be timers. Brian has an assortment of timers going. But the idea is that Cord here will lead us off.
Okay.
He'll have about a 5-minute presentation, and then we'll have about 15 minutes of discussion after that.
There's the rules.
Oh, here are the rules. The discussion isn't limited to our prompts. You can have other questions and ideas to contribute, and I never hesitated to think that y'all would.
Guess we'll go to the next slide and I'll get started.
Are you gonna go?
I'm ready, I'm starting. Right on, all right, hi, Cord Bucher, Deputy Director. We're gonna talk about the recent statutory updates that passed in the 2023 legislative session. 5 key changes. Next slide, please. So House Bill 2372 is in your packets. If you go to the 5th and 6th page, you can actually get the full bill language and see all the stuff I'm gonna talk about in the slideshow. These changes clarify the roles of the council and division. We have some updates to our purpose as an agency, and there's some opportunities to reflect these changes and new approaches to our work. Here are the 5 changes. Next slide, please. Number 1, we've updated our purpose. So you can see the original language at the top, and you can see the update below. We've added some things to the purpose, including workforce success, not just education. We've talked about promoting protective factors. We've shifted from the focus on crime prevention to preventing justice system involvement. Subtle but important change. And we've also tried to make it clear that the council originally language just provides direction, but we actually have a director that provides direction. So we've tried to really say what the council does, which is to develop policy and provide guidance to the division. Next slide, please. Next change, we have some new approaches to prevention. There's actually 2 things in the statutes that I want to highlight. One is a change from language around preventing juvenile delinquency to, again, reducing the risk factors that lead to justice system involvement. We've also added language specifying that culturally specific and traditional practices and other emerging models are also ways that we can do that work. Next slide, please. We've changed the language around our work to prevent what was referred to as gang violence and gang involvement. We've now expanded that to talk about community violence and address gang activity, but to emphasize public health approach to this reduction in violence and work with community-based programs. We've also added some language to again talk about our workforce development efforts, re-engagement, and other programs designed to help with this prevention work. Next slide, please. So we have some new language. We've incorporated language around protective factors. So there was something in the statutes that said that we would stress reinvestment in youth. And we had some conversations, and that language from 2011 doesn't really seem to clearly say anything. And so we was, well, what are we trying to do? What does reinvestment mean? What are we trying to do or build for young people? And we decided to adjust that to say building protective factors and contributing to the well-being of youth and families. There's also an addition of protective to addressing individual risk factors. So not just focusing on risk, but also on what is beneficial and protective. And the next slide, please. So this is an interesting one. We made a few tweaks to help clarify the council and division roles in the funding and grant making process. And in the discussions we've had about sovereign nation funding, we talked with DOJ about what in our statute would allow the council to essentially direct funding for a specific purpose. And so this language here was added under the council may, there was this determining the means by which services may be provided. And so now we've added that that includes directing the distribution of funding by the division through processes approved by the council. And so that is something that will help whenever the council says, we want to do this thing, and there's a clear statutory supported basis for you to do that. And now I'll go to the next slide. Here are my questions. Well, no questions, I guess. So I need to know. I don't know what happened there. Oh, I guess I accidentally turned on a special effect discussion. Next effect, please. Maybe try. I don't remember the question, so I really have to see the slide. There we go. What changes that I've shared stand out to you as being most important or impactful? What change do you see calling for us to do our work differently? And what opportunities do you see emerging as a result of these changes? And with that, I'm done, and I'll pass it back to the group.
30 seconds left.
Yeah, what do I do? It's the first one. I'm done my part.
Or race through that, but there's a lot of good content, and we would love for y'all to work through kind of what he brought up. And that we can think about it somewhat to the idea of the dots here. You don't need to know. The dots that people put up of what changes stand out to you as the most important. I'm just gonna leave with that.
I really like the shift from juvenile crime prevention to protective factors and public health approaches, and really thinking about holistic community approaches rather than punishing youth. So that is very exciting.
See some nodding back.
I was just nodding in total agreement with what Dan was.
I was having like this, I wouldn't call it like cognitive dissonance, but I was having this feeling in my brain of like, wait a minute, isn't this what we've been doing the whole time? And so I had that, like, it's great that in statute, it now reflects what I think has been the spirit of the council and YDO for as long as I've been on it. And then at the same time, I was having this feeling of like, oh my God, like, it's literally, there's so much work happening in that. It, like, my brain just started firing off of like, that's what, in my day job, this is what the work that I do and so many partners do. And so then I was like, have I been completely failing in my role as a council member to not like connect those pieces? And so I think that's where my brain was going to like, well, I don't know if it changes, like, if it's calling us to do our work differently, but I think it's for me, thinking about like, gosh, how can I, in my time remaining on the council, like really be like, here are all of the different partners and players and funding opportunities, like, hey, this youth summit is already happening, come here, like, and I just don't know, like, I don't wanna overwhelm y'all with like, hey, here's all the things that I know of that are happening, so I'm feeling very much like, and to build off of what you were saying earlier, Brian, like, it's not on just YDO to tell council how to engage. I think the question I'm holding is, how does YDO want council to be like, hey, here's all of these other funding opportunities that are really similar to what y'all are doing. Are there opportunities to braid, or, I don't know, that's just what my brain was firing off while I was listening to Corey.
Yeah, I really like taking the public health approach, to prevention, and then really, even though I can't remember which slide it was, but just the shift in language, it may be slight, but it actually helps to change perspective and how people approach, because I see so many youth when it's looking at you're the problem, then people, that's how they respond instead of saying, what has been the issue that has put you there? So even though it may be a slight wording change, words are important and it changes how we respond. So we did that.
And yes, I think this does reflect what we've been doing at the council and at YDO for a while. But one of the biggest pieces of dissonance when I first joined the council was that that was not how the legislature saw us. The legislature saw us very differently and really affiliated much closer with the juvenile justice system, and not even recognizing that the juvenile justice system is far more and far more rich than it is. And this language just does a much better job at capturing what we're really trying to do. And I think a lot of legislators want to be done, so that we can do it without having new entities created to do it in parallel and making the system more complex.
I was just gonna say, Abraham was just pointing out to me that a couple of years ago, we literally were having a conversation about the seed and the vision around the emphasis on public health, community, all that. And so it's really good to see that the council's voice is really heard and actualized. And opportunity wise, you only can do so many rounds on this council. And so that legacy, editing the language to create space to direct the kinds of grants that organizations will conjure. Sorry, I know anyway, I'm sorry I'm speaking in such a, in the way I am, it's just, they'll conjure the kind of stuff that will really make a positive impact. So that's the opportunity I see, to really keep any kind of vague or ineffective programming pretty focused.
I appreciated the addition of workforce success and the updated purpose. Just, I think anytime there can be accountability to outcomes and actual measurable outcomes is a great thing, because it really does more clearly and specifically define what we're all doing together.
Perhaps this is the attorney side of me coming out, but I love the additional specification and the change from stress reinvestment in youth to something a little bit more substantive, build protective factors and contribute to the well-being of youth and families. But not only because it's more specific, but because it recognizes that there is more to a youth than just the individual person, and that the family, however the family looks, whether it's parents or parents, guardians, whatever it is, that we can't expect that youth to succeed if we don't surround them with a support network. And as an immigration attorney, I see that all the time. You know, there's lots and lots of services for US citizen children, but then zero services for their parents. And how do we expect them to thrive? So seeing that change was pretty amazing.
So fun.
So the opportunities to see emerging as a result. I appreciate the change in language, and yet there's still some ambiguity in word well-being. And some ambiguity on who defines protective factors. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to continue to do our work and continue to put conversations around and content around those words. I think it's moving in the right direction. I appreciated, got the opportunity to testify on behalf of it, and we still have work to do.
Molly, how do you see that work unfold? Don't mind. Well, it's your. I'm gonna ask you questions here.
I think we started it yesterday. I mean, Julie, to be honest with you, it's being in person together. It's being in connection together. It's learning from each other and learning. Yeah, I think it's in connection with each other. And then of course the staff pulls it together and shares with us ideas. But I think yesterday we started to put meat on some, interesting skeletal bones of what this meant. And then today we're talking about the legislation that was kind of driven behind it. So I think we're working towards that, but I think it's in conversation.
Well, about 5 minutes left. Can someone define what a protective factor is and also what a risk factor is, Juliet?
Thanks, Brian.
I got yes, so a protective factor actually has two really important characteristics. One is that it is a characteristic that helps promote the positive parts, the resiliency and support, the beneficial aspects of what a youth or youth characteristics or the circumstances, their circumstances are, so that those protective factors are things that help promote positive outcomes. The other thing that's really important about protective factors is that they are buffers for risk factors. They are buffers for negative things that go on. So they have both the benefit of promoting the positives as well as also being a shield and helping us manage stressors and challenging things in our lives, or in youth's lives. So they play kind of two roles. And so in looking at one of the things that I think is really interesting about some of the work and evaluation that we've done is it is important to recognize the risk factors, which are the things that are challenges and that contribute to higher likelihood that something hard will happen or bad will happen. But the protective factors, when you can build on those, you can create kind of additional benefits because you not only are providing supports and encouraging the positive outcomes, but you're also helping people manage those hard things that are inevitably going to happen. So all those risks that we cannot control or that have happened already or that are part of a person's circumstances, youth in particular, there are certain things they can control and certain things they cannot control. And so when we figure, those kinds of circumstances that are difficult, if we can build on positives, the protective factors, they can help us manage stress.
Perfect. I mean, that understanding, I think, around risk factors and protective factors, and for the juvenile justice people in the room, or people on our juvenile justice committee, and understanding the role that our county partners play in
either increasing protective factors or decreasing risk factors. And the work that Juliet leads in sort of evaluating the juvenile crime prevention work, those reports tell that story and tell the important story of county's work to decrease risk and increase protective factors among young people who are served by the dollars that we're allocating to counties and tribes. So just a little commercial right there. We've got 2 minutes left, 2.5 minutes. Any other thoughts or questions that we haven't answered? I think just a reminder, if there are things that you're wondering or questions, and there's the opportunity to put your stickies up on the paper back here, parking lot. Yeah, policy and update, this orange one with my really creative handwriting. Christine.
I don't want to blow your timeline here. One of the language changes that's on page 2 that I really appreciate is the one that says are informed by developmental science, evidence, and effective or promising community practices. So I know it seems like a million years ago now, I shared that our association was trying to get some legislation passed to create a minimum age for children before they could be brought into juvenile court and have a formal petition filed. That unfortunately didn't happen this last session, but that doesn't mean we've given up on it. So when I look at a statute that is saying, recognizing that children are different and we need to look at the developmental science, I think that's really powerful. It's just a couple of words in here, but I will be using it. Thank you, court and team. Molly will use it too.
Very good. All right. Yes. Yes, from the online world. The following presentation actually builds on some of these questions about evaluation and data. So, Bill, up to you.
Wrong spot. What's that?
Oh, really? No, tell the Bill. Okay.
I'll go to Bill.
Let's go to Bill.
Yes. Audible.
I'll take this time to cheat a little bit. I'm Bill Hansel. We'll be going over our data and evaluation.
Keep advancing. Yep. We'll get you there, Phil. That's the end of Anya's. You're good. Keep going forward.
Yeah, it's not. No.
Let's go on. Advance.
I must have done something to do like a special effect where I really screwed up.
Okay.
What?
Oh, it's some. It's an action.
It's the internet.
Yeah. There it goes. There it goes.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Don't test it to see if it's going to go forward.
All right.
Great. Thanks.
All right, I'll jump right in. Today we'll go over a little data overview, a few terms, and then what data is actually reported to us in our community investment grant initiatives, and then evaluation or analysis, which is really the art of asking questions. Next slide, please. So what data is reported to us is broadly covered by quantitative and qualitative data. A mnemonic device that I appreciate is quantity and quality. If you think of a glass of wine, you can say this has 4 ounces in it. That is quantitative. The aroma smells like vanilla. The aftertaste, tannins with, fresh earth, I don't know, is qualitative. Within that as well, qualitative is really our reports, our written reports. So our narrative and budget reports. Quantitative is the actual data report, and to some extent our expenditure report. There are also levels of aggregation. At the individual level, you can always aggregate higher. If you start with a higher level of aggregation, you cannot go backwards. That's important in the sense of, like, if you report in aggregate the number of youth served, and then in aggregate the number of Hispanic, Latino, Latinas served, you can't then say how many female Latina were served. So individual level data is primarily what we collect, and it's collected through self-report and official record. Self-report is, they're both valuable. Self-report might be race, ethnicity, that can change. A youth that has multiple racial identities can change that at their comfort level. Official record would be something that we want in terms of like grade level. We prefer that from official record as opposed to a self-report. Next slide, please. So this is the demographic data that we actually collect. Gender, male, female, binary. I'll also note that we follow federal kind of roll-ups in terms of reporting. Race, ethnicity is required. You can see those there. We will then calculate 2 or more races, which is a mutually exclusive category in the roll-up, but we can do that from those flags and date of birth. Those are our demographic data. Next slide, please. This is programmatic data. So we collect start and end dates, and then we collect education and employment status at start and education and employment status at end. At the end of every year, we force end dating, so that gives us a comparative, a snapshot. So we have a status at start and we have a status at end that we can look. So grade advancement, employment, stuff like that is captured there. Next slide, please. Evaluation, types of questions that can be answered. Demographic is really about the who. It's primarily quantitative and descriptive. Programmatic is the where, when, and how long. That is also primary. These aren't exclusive, so you can have both. And the what is really qualitative, because we don't collect what they're actually doing in the data report. Next slide, please. This is, for me, one of my favorite lines of poetry. Always the beautiful answer. Who asked a more beautiful question? I think that's important because of the who. And for me, it centers it in that this data is really a representation of youth. Next slide, please. All right, wrapped it up. We're at discussion. Fancy flow. All right, the discussion questions are really, what is a question you would like to ask of the reported data? What conclusions could possibly be made from answers to reported data? That's a little bit oddly worded, but what conclusions could possibly be made from answers of the reported data questions? And then, is there additional data you would like to see reported in order to ask a more beautiful question?
Well, do you want to maybe, I say this and you can go on, important
distinction. This bill's talking about our community investment grants, like our youth grants. We, in the last session, in some ways, we're talking about juvenile crime prevention, juvenile related justice data, and that data that then Julia and her team analyzes and evaluates is in a kind of different context, right? So just know that we have 2, we call them data systems. One is definitely in a data system around the juvenile justice work,
And then there's an opportunity in some ways to say, with the community investment data, I mean, these wonderful grant managers are kind of capturing this work, and in other grant areas, like in Excel spreadsheets, maybe survey monkey apply, maybe smart sheets, but not an official database. So this
We're gonna pass it again to you, Liz. Awesome.
And I think we've talked about this and my memory just doesn't serve me well. I think building off of the last thing that Cord shared about the YDO's mission really focusing on protective factors, my curiosity is how are we measuring that in data that we're collecting, so that we're actually looking at how programming that we fund is supporting building on protective factors for young people. And then it also makes me just think about other opportunities for statewide data that's already being collected to be able to maximize, pull in things elsewhere. So that's just what was a question that came up for me.
Other questions? There's been some conversation about research.
Hi everyone. I missed, unfortunately, this, and I can't wait to find out exactly what I missed. I have been using this new framing that I have found really helpful, and I wanted to share it in terms of the way that data is used. There are different data mindsets, and if we think about that, some data is really around compliance. Compliance data often answers questions, am I doing what I'm supposed to do? There's also data that can be used around telling a story, and telling story data is often data that is really helpful in energizing donors to give or volunteers to give, or volunteers to participate. And there's also data for learning, and that's really program quality data and it helps people answer the question, am I doing the right things? Am I doing things well? So I also think as we consider what data we'd like to encourage our grantees to collect, are we wearing a compliance hat? Are we wearing a hat where we're trying to tell a story to our funder in order to say this money is valuable? Because compliance data doesn't always tell that story that we want to have told. Or are we really trying to encourage self-discovery and improvement and learning at the site, because that's a different type of data. And so it's just helpful for us to have maybe a little bit of clarity about what we're asking and why, because that might really shift some of our conversations.
Other thoughts about data and research?
We're capturing these questions, right? So as we have your question, we want to answer all of it right at the moment. It's captured.
Thank you, Jared.
Celeste, I think that was a really helpful thing to throw into the mix, because we always have multiple purposes, and we can't get away from compliance data because we have federal money and state money, and it's all baked in. We have to be able to tell stories. I think that the most exciting part, though, is the learning, the continual improvement data, and I would echo the point that it'd be great to collect both risk factors and protective factor information in some kind of a standardized way, just to know which of those protective factors have the most balance in terms of being able to provide resilience to you. But it may be so individual that that's not possible. But I know from other tables I'm sitting at that the better we can do this work, the less pressure will be on some of those other systems like the youth behavioral health system. And we need to be working closely with all of those partners too.
Yeah, Anya and I wanted to share that one of the things that we've started doing with our GCP evaluation, particularly with the tribal partners, is in addition to collecting the risk and protective factor information and the juvenile justice records, is asking them for success stories. So having them describe the opportunities that they've had to interact with youth who they've really seen grow in a special way, or have an accomplishment, or be able to really see the impact of some of the cultural services. So being able to see it and have, just like you're saying, Celeste, having that opportunity to see the real personalities come through, the real benefits and the impact in a different kind of way, in a personalized way. We're also gathering pictures. So I think that's the other qualitative type of data where to go around some of the imagery and being able to see what activities look like and see what youth in success look like. So that's a different kind of story.
Thanks. Juliet, I've worked with Juliet for a long time in many incarnations, and when I look at our field in juvenile justice, the use of a validated risk assessment tool, which MPC research partnered with the Juvenile Directors Association many decades ago now, but we were like, I don't know, we were like maybe 10 and I was 12. But it's the foundation of the work that we do, right? Looking at these criminogenic, crime driving risk factors. And it's super important, so I'm not knocking that at all. But in my department over the last few years, our county commissioners set some strategic priorities for the county, very high level strategic priorities. And then each department had to come up with its own strategic business plan to try to feed into achieving those high level strategic priorities. So the one that the juvenile department fell under was ensuring safe, healthy families and communities. So that's pretty broad and it covered a lot of departments. And originally when it started, we were the only data we were looking at was recidivism. And we got this amazing woman named Alice Perry who joined us a few years ago. And she said, you know, it should be more than just whether or not a kid commits a new crime. And so we started talking about, okay, what does that mean? And we decided to start collecting data. It's been a long road, but really using a public health model to try to get at wellness, because our mission is we not only want children to not commit additional delinquent acts, but we want them to successfully transition into adulthood. And you just mentioned success, and I was like, oh, that's part of our mission statement. But so we went down this road a couple of years ago in the schools doing, everybody was like, that's prevention. What are you doing? You're a juvenile department. Don't you cuff them and stuff them? That's what you do. Give them some hots and cots. That's your job. And when we start, literally, I have people saying, what are you doing here? We took some of our money and we put it into a prevention pilot in the schools using a tool, Molly knows about this, SBIRT, screening, brief intervention, referral to treatment and services. And our thought was, it was at the beginning of Measure 110, we want to identify kids who are struggling, or in COVID, behavioral health needs that are unmet, substance use or abuse needs that are unmet. We want to figure out who these kids are. Why do we have to wait till they are on our doorstep at the juvenile department? So we invested in that. It's been amazing. It's been pretty life-changing for a lot of kids we're doing this with Gladstone School District, and we got some, and then money got tight, but there was an opioid settlement, so they gave us a little bit of money, so we were able to expand it to the middle school, and so that's all great. But then we said, why aren't we doing this in our own department? Because we have this 24-hour juvenile intake and assessment center where police bring in people to us and we do a series of screenings. That has been the first week we started doing this. We started May 1st. It's this interactive tool that measures. It's not the same tool that MPC created for us. It's all about domains related to wellness. So it's this interactive tool they do on a tablet, and as they're responding, they get feedback. Like, really, you get 8 hours of sleep each night? That's great for your health. And so basically we're learning all of these things, like 1 in 4 of the kids who came through our door had previously attempted suicide, which we never knew. So now we're bringing in resources to help with that. We're hearing about bullying. We're hearing about being targeted because of their gender diversity. We're hearing about eating disorders. So it's giving us all this other information, this data that we can use to address the whole child and work with their families. So for me, that's those wellness issues that we're identifying are part of what are the more beautiful questions that we need to develop. So anyway, sorry, you can tell I'm excited. Come on January 8th and you can hear more about this.
Right, we've got about 4 minutes, I think, so wanted to, so Edie, did you have a comment or question?
I wanna,
I might, that's you gonna say.
hey, Bill, I wanna throw this question back at you and ask, what would you like to see in terms of data gathering amongst organizations that are sharing? Like, what are some of the hurdles that you're facing and how might this council assist in, if at all, in mitigating some of those hurdles?
Thank you. Good question. And just to be clear, I wanted to go over, so if you caught, the data we collect is gender, race, ethnicity, date of birth. So 3 things, and then start date and end date, right? So that is what we're collecting. And the answer to your question is a real balance between capacity of our grantees. So in this current edition, we, I think, are about as slim down as possible, right? Just basically the bare necessity to describe the youth that are being served. And a few crude measures of duration and progress. So to answer your question is really a balance between do our grantees have the capacity to report more? What I would really like to see is to be able to link our data to other data sets. Because at that point in time, like if we can link our data to ODE data sets or OYA data sets, or Oregon Health Authority data sets, all of a sudden we can bring in more data that's collected through other sources, which lessens the burden on our grantees. So it's a tough question because just like collecting protective factors, right? Like we would have to identify what those are and then how a grantee would be able to report those in a meaningful way. And so it's kind of a non-answer. But in an ideal world, I would like to know what it is they're doing and some measure of what it is that they're doing. So maybe attendance, if they're offering classes, which youth are attending those classes with some regularity, because then we could look at, the outcome is different for a youth who attends 1 session versus a youth who attends 10 sessions, something like that. That would build in a little bit more to do with program evaluation, and effect.
And I'll add just a little bit, I'm the Future Ready analyst, and Future Ready has, thank you, Bill. Future Ready has significantly more burdensome data reporting requirements. How many? It's hundreds of pieces of data for each participant, and 1,700 cells for 20 youth is what a grantee is asked to submit. And that includes the statutorily defined priority populations and where participants fit in those priority populations. There's some overlap there around race and gender. But what we've seen is it is burdensome for our small grantees. And so then there is a question of, should we, my own timer's telling me to stop. Should we collect more data? And if so, is there a way we, YDO, can be more supportive of particularly our small grantees that don't have databases? They're working off of Google form to do an intake on a youth. And so then that would be kind of a question I would bounce back to all y'all of what might it look like for us to collect more substantive data, to do better storytelling, to not just be in compliance, but to be more in the sense of continuous improvement. What might we do better? And how can we support grantees in collecting the data and not have that be a barrier? Sam?
It brings up for me the question of whether or not there's some way to have some sort of grant add-on that could be dedicated to enabling a particular community-based organization to participate more fully in this kind of research and building capacity within their organization to do this kind of monitoring, but also not creating a disincentive by requiring so much data.
I wanted to share one thing real quick, only because it's optional data, so I didn't report it here, but this biennium, we are also collecting, for lack of a better term, pre and post, tests, which is to say, if an organization is conducting an inventory of some sort, like social emotional, sense of belonging, something like that, they will have the option to report those pre and post type scores to us. So that's the way we're trying to pull in something else, because it's already something they're doing. So it's not an additional requirement, but we're kind of looking forward to see what comes of that.
Thanks, Bill. All right, we're moving to number 3. Clap, yeah. Next.
Oh, sure. It's not on the agenda, but we're gonna give everybody a break at this point, and we're gonna come back in about 10 minutes. So at 11:40, we're gonna kick back into these, but give everybody some time to breathe, get a snack and coffee.
Like, we're not breaking up, we're not breaking up soon, right? You can have lunches now. Okay, so it's fine if we're sitting here now eating. Okay. Okay, and have another break then, go wash up. Okay. Right. I didn't want to have everyone set their lunches out, then break it away from their table. Does your name on it? But I announced that, right?
lunches are actually here, so we're gonna let you grab your lunch now. We'll adjust a little bit, and you can get lunch now, and we'll continue the talks. You can eat lunch after the next two talks, we'll move into discussions, but lunches are available, your name should be on it, right outside the door.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a little bit more back and forth, and, we encourage all participation.
Thank you. You got my. So once we get the slides going, so here's the thing, I woke up at 1 o'clock this morning thinking, what am I gonna tell you? Because we have the slides, so we'll use the slides, but the most important thing is different. Most important thing is you're here, and it's wonderful to be together, and it's wonderful to have you join us, see the faces, and Julia, who is the director of procurement at Oregon Department of Education.
So sorry.
Because I was gonna be here. So this is what the real relationship is about. And those not changing. So, what I'm gonna, so at 1 o'clock, I came up with all kinds of ideas. Most of them were kind of weird. Unfortunately, I forgot most of them. But I was trying to figure out how do we frame this part of the presentation so it makes sense. And I don't know what I'm gonna tell you makes sense to you or not, but I like to think about the state advisory group and other duties of the council as old money. Because that's something that we inherited. That's something that's been around. So this is not a new addition to, these are not new responsibilities of both youth development, Oregon, and the entities that comprise it, the staff and the council itself. This is something that's been around for quite some time. Christina was 12, I was 11, Molly was 9. Jimmy was probably 8. One was all already in existence, and guess what? It started even before that time. So let's move on. So we're talking about old money. However, there is still ways of making new rules always. You know, part of this thing I was thinking about, like rules, right? So what are rules? You can deal with rules in many ways. You can not know them, you can ignore them, you can not like them and break them. You can break things because you just like breaking things. But the most important thing, I think, which is with our, sort of within our power scope, is make new rules. And that's what we're doing. So court's presentation was about making new rules that make sense. So in a way, although we're talking about old money here, well, used very, very loosely. But there are still some changes that have been made on different levels to the rules associated with the old money. So number one, so in case you didn't know, you are the state advisory group for the state of Oregon. And your purpose is to uphold the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act, which is gonna be 50 years old next year. So there's a party being planned in Washington, DC in November, almost exactly a year from now. And guess what? As state advisory group members, you will be invited to attend. And we have federal funds to support your travel and your presence there. So I don't have the exact dates, but this is what's happening. So the act was passed in 2074, it was reauthorized several times. The latest one was 2018, and it's supposed to get new authorization this year. Having holidays, it's unlikely. So I'm thinking they'll probably do it 50 years later, which just kind of makes sense, right? Well, who wants to reauthorize something in 49 years if you can do it in the 50th year? So, but that said, there are rules that apply to the state advisory group and the state designated agency to take the money from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention that was also created by the same act. And distribute the funds. Now we only got formula grants, Title II funds. It used to be a much larger allocation, different monies coming in. But again, rules are being changed. So some of the monies that we used to receive, known as Title V, goes to other states like mentoring services that is competitive now that they have. JBAG, Juvenile Accountability Block Grant, is gone. So anyways, those things change. So old money is still changing. But the important thing here to remember, in order for us to receive any funds, whatever they are left, and now it's Title II, we have to follow the rules that are defined by the Act. There are 28 points of compliance we have to follow under the Act. I'm not going to say which ones are more important than others, but there are several that comes with changes in the amounts of money we receive. And there are 4, they call 4 requirements. Some people call them 4 protections. But basically, the purpose of the act was to save children. To save children, to make sure that the juvenile justice systems across the country are fair and just, and children are not harmed. And Lindsay here makes sure that we meet those first 3 requirements as a state. So you don't see Lindsay very often because she's traveling. and her travel destination is anywhere in the state. People she visits are law enforcement agencies, jails. Fortunately, she doesn't have to go to prisons because Department of Corrections does it for us. And she visits juvenile departments and all kinds of things, and she's looking for 3 things, and she gets reports. So 1, I cannot pronounce this deinstitutionalizing blah, 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 so we call it DSO, but you can read it. So basically, the purpose of that core protection, I like to use protection because it's really to protect kids, is that no kid who committed a stupid thing, like skipping school or getting drunk, are not penalized for it because it's not a criminal offense if they were over 21 or over 18, depending on, what they've done. So they may not be confined. Sight and sound separation, kids cannot be in the same room with adults. They cannot be seen, they cannot be heard, they cannot be together. And jail removal, use cannot be detained more than 6 hours, and it's also under special circumstance. So Lindsay monitors all of it. So speaking of data, that's the kind of data information that comes to her, and she analyzes, making sure that there are no violations, and if violations are found, she writes letters, trying to mitigate what was found. And if we track the whole, that was, then I can see it. Oh, the good thing I can see that part. Okay. So that's Lindsay's responsibility. And we've done a lot of work, mostly Lindsay, revising our compliance monitoring system in the state to make sure that we're following the rules that the feds are setting up for us. And how the state advisory group is committed here, you help make this happen. So if you think that you're here randomly, no, you were selected. Because each one of you, council members, play a role. The composition of the state advisory group is very prescribed. Each person has to come with certain expertise behind and work experience and life experience and so forth. But another thing, I'm jumping around because I didn't want to put 28 points of compliance here, but only the important one. Now, the addressing and reducing racial and ethnic disparities, also known as RED, in juvenile justice system is another core protection. And drum roll here, please. Thank you. Not for me, but I have a big announcement to make. Lawrence White, who was in that position before, and then she left to work for federal government, is coming back. And he's starting on December 11th, and we're super excited about it. Because Lawrence, as he has said to us during the interview process, why do you want to come back? And because he feels that this is what he was meant to do. So we're super excited about that. And another part that I would like to mention here is that the state advisory group has to obtain input from juveniles currently under the jurisdiction of juvenile justice system. So guess what? Next committee meeting, the Youth Development Council meeting, will be held at McLaren Youth Correctional Facility. So we will have an opportunity to interact with youth there. Okay, yeah. I'm not following the rule because what we just said, we're breaking them, we're making new ones. Yes. And then I forgot. What do you say? Do you remember what I said?
I'll just point it out.
Because the Youth Development Council and members is also the state advisory group, that is not the model that most other states have. There is just a SAG, the state advisory group. They just deal with those protections. That is their purpose and focus. And in Oregon, because of history and
other contexts that we don't have a lot of time to get into, we were asking you to play both roles, to be both the youth development council, the governing body for the division and the setting the work that Court described, and also to serve as the state advisory group, ensuring and overseeing the core protections, ensuring that the makeup of this group is which is very prescribed, but we kind of behind the scenes are looking at and saying, no, this person can help fulfill this. It's a SAG responsibility, this person can do this, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got a dual responsibility more than most in other states. And maybe there's like a pause, since we're doing things differently, are there questions about the state advisory group or comments about that function?
Just quick question, well, two quick questions. One, are there states that don't take Title II money and so don't follow the DEP? And then the second, as we're trying to fill the council with youth, does that change our composition in a way that might be out of compliance?
It's the other way around. So there are states who don't take Title II money, and that's the mystery to me, because they're called non-participating states. But they somehow take other money. They just don't have to follow the full protection. One of the states is Wyoming. I still don't understand how they pull it off. But so there's something. But to have a state advisory group, you have to take the money because that's part of the requirement. However, in 99% of states and US territories, they all do the same thing. They do nothing but. We're the only one that's different. That's going back to breaking rules and making rules, right? We just made this rule. So why have a separate body if it can be placed within Youth Development Council? It can share responsibility. And I one job that I'm gonna come back to him. But before I do, I'll answer the questions about youth. Having 20% of youth on the composition of the state advisory group is a federal requirement. So we have to have no less than 20% of members of the Youth Development Council, aka state advisory group, to be under age 18 or 28 at the time of appointment. So that's the change that actually came with the last reauthorization. It used to be 24, now it's 28, so we have a little bit of a scale.
And I think, Jeff, you saw and others saw that we had this goal of trying to get to 50%. And I believe that because of the age under 28, I think that we can intelligently add more youth and still meet the SAG requirements that people represent different kinds of perspectives. So I think we can do both.
Thank you, Brett. And I warned Jeff that I'm gonna mention when I started out this presentation about going out. So Jeff mentioned the other day at the end of the day that staff at YD with YDO does most of the work. I respectfully disagree because the Juvenile Justice Committee of the Youth Development Council does most of the work. And it's all prescribed by statutes and by federal law. So that's why we have a super active Juvenile Justice Committee. They meet regularly and they actually do the work. I just coordinate. Mostly it's Joy coordinates. But seriously though, and we will talk about it a little more, because a lot of things are prescribed by statute. We talked about the federal thing, and yes, that's not the only thing that we do as a council, but it's also not the only thing that Juvenile Justice Committee does. I don't want to say for you, but at your delegation. That's why we have sometimes at recommendation of the Juvenile Justice Committee, the council takes a vote, right? But the committee goes through a lot of work before those recommendations are being presented to you. So you can make an informed decision without necessarily spending months doing the work that the committee does. So now we're going back to the state requirements. The juvenile crime prevention, we talked about it several times, you heard the word. So juvenile crime prevention is also old money. That's old state money. Been around since 1999, I think. So Molly and Christina, well, I forgot how old our ages were. Young, very young. But anyway, so it's been around, again, it's moved from place to place. But a lot of things stay the same, so statutes have not really changed much, other than where the money is being housed and administered, right? But what's really important, so what you do here as a council, you decide on the allocation formula. So over the years, we've been using population-based formula. So, well, I'm not gonna go into multiple details because Sally is looking at me and whatever agreements we've made, she's like, trying to remind me, and I pretend that I'm not discussing terms, like looking different, their protection here. But anyway, but what's so important, the allocation is decided by the council, and you have to approve the minimum grant allocation. That's why we had a vote, remember? So the more money we get from the legislature, the more money we have to distribute, so the higher the minimum grant can be. Another thing that I'm gonna say, this is where the role of the council is to advocate on different levels. What we cannot do as state staff working for the governor, we cannot go around and provide you with some educational materials that you could use in advocacy work with both the legislature and other things. And we have a council member here, not gonna say, but if it weren't for the magic that council member somehow produced, we would still not be getting the JCP funds allocated this year. And it's not because of you, Julia. It's not because of procurement. It's because of Department of Justice that was sitting on the legal sufficiency review for unexplainable amount of time. But one phone call from a council member, the next day the money was released. Amazing, right? So this is the role of the council council member that could play. You know, people in high places, use them. Make that phone call. Much appreciate. So not only the council decides how much money to give to whom, but also what are the criteria that people come up with to apply for the funds, although it's a distribution, but it's not a given. So this is how much money you can receive, but there are certain things that you need to provide to show that you adhere to the guidelines that the council develops, the Juvenile Justice Committee, on your behalf. So a lot, another statute, how those plans, what they have to have, but the purpose is to prevent crime, juvenile crime. And Juliet here, she shared a little bit with you earlier that we're looking for stories from the tribe, how youth are being successful, which also measures success. Since it's old money, the old definition of success was to meet key performance measures. Anybody remember? Like the state of Oregon was measured by if the state agency meets key performance measures or if it doesn't, and all kind of like crazy stuff, right? So the key performance measure for juvenile justice, for juvenile crime prevention was recidivism reduction, right? And there was a certain level that you had to reach. And for kids who have not been engaged in juvenile justice system, if they commit the crime or not. So Juliet here is not just, I shouldn't say just, there is such thing. So Juliet and her team, they're essential to the ecology of this group and juvenile justice in Oregon. And I think Molly and Christina will agree with me. Like, MPC research is like intricate partner and part of the success of the system.
You're all out of time, but 5,
Okay, because next one's are short.
good, and 1.
Yeah, thank you. And the juvenile detention guidelines, that's a biggie. That's like, I'm actually dreading. When I was awake at 1 o'clock in the morning, I thought, oh God, this one is coming up too. But this is super important. This is important because it's in statute. Look at those. Youth Development Council and Department of Corrections develop and revise as necessary guidelines pertaining to the operations of juvenile detention facilities. We've had what, 6 editions? The 7th is coming up. Now, guess what? Because people keep making new rules. And when they make new rules, they change statute. The guidelines need to reflect new statute. That's a different job to us.
More the merrier.
Right? So, of course, we don't do it alone. It's not just council, it's not just Department of Corrections. We bring partners from the juvenile departments, Oregon Youth Authority, law enforcement, criminal justice commission, just about anybody who has an influence in and on juvenile justice system. So this work is coming because, again, so this is our plan in 2024. And we can move to the next one, because I said this was going to be short. But another one, so it's just not a lot to say about it right now, unless you have questions. But this is another chunk of work, like another bucket of responsibility that the Juvenile Justice Committee carries for the Youth Development Council. So there's such a thing as a 30-day extended detention program. They may not operate without sanctioning of the Youth Development Council. So think about detention facility that has kids for 30+ days. You are the entity that allows for that to happen. So how do you do it? We made rules. We have a ton of rules around that. It's based on statute. But that work needs to resume again. Because at this point we have, I think, seven that operate as 30-day extended detention facilities. So they have to be renewed every 6 years, unless they make any changes in between. So we have 2 that need to be renewed, and I think we might be getting a new one coming in. So anyway, so that's important. It's super important because think about this. I used to harm Julia. Julia, I would say, well, could you please like get this contract going, because it's children. So think about it that it's children. Everything we talked about here, it's the lives of children that we're really, really affecting. Are they protected? Are they treated fairly? Are they there? Are they receiving the therapeutic treatment that they need? So think like children is what you need to think about in this work. Yeah, and there's multiple rules. So that work is also, so we need to look at the rules. We need to make sure that our application process is still up to speed and up to date, whether we have enough language that has changed around developmental approach and trauma-informed care and all of these things. So I'm going to be quiet. Oh, there's not, sorry, thank you, Brian. So, and this is just an overview of new and current initiatives that are happening parallel to ours, or we participate in them within the state of Oregon. So the Juvenile Delinquency Improvement Program Committee is looking at the operations of juvenile delinquency courts in the state of Oregon. And they have done extensive work on that, and of course, courts are connected to what we do. The Juvenile Justice Policy Commission was Oregon Criminal Justice Commission. It's a new entity. It was established during this last legislative session. I think the idea was sort of borrowed from a state advisory group concept, but it's not a state advisory group. You are. Just keep that in mind. So of course we will try to be connected to the work of that group. the Juvenile Department Directors Association training, I think it's the annual training that the association does annually, and we've been very proud to support as much as we can with some federal funds and state funds and activities. And so, you know, neither of them mentioned it, but Christina is the current president. The association, and Molly has just finished her term. Well, what's the title for that? I always forget.
Past president.
Past president. So. And the national efforts, the NEPC Foundation Prevention Reform and Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative, all these things. So we're also starting a prevention reform. Together with NEPC Foundation and Coalition for Juvenile Justice. Do we have another slide?
I would ask if there are questions or comments, because we gotta move to next. We don't have time to go through all of this. What's that? Yeah, we have questions. Put up stickies. Ask, what's that? Anybody online, Melissa or Neva? Anybody in the room, just any big takeaways? And I felt like, you know, when we did our SWOT analysis, we didn't have the benefit of having Anya in some of the SWOT work that the staff did. We did our best to add that, but this work feels like within the council, I've heard people ask questions that I'm not clear, so we wanted, this time has been worthwhile, and understand the connection between kind of the two sides of the house that we sometimes like, the grant making community work and then the juvenile justice work. Anya and the grant managers and Joy and Lindsay have done the job of kind of connecting, but we wanted to make sure you all understood this, and for the new people, you get this. So spend a little extra time, appreciate it, Anya, thank you.
We just read the work. So the reminder, and also an opportunity to continue this conversation on learning more. So Christina Patman is hoping that the Plaquemines County Juvenile Department, the next Juvenile Justice Committee, which will be January 8th, from 12 to 3, there will be a presentation from Latino Network, the provider, Juvenile Crime Prevention Services in Plaquemines County. That will be hopefully a little visit to the intake facility, right? So it's open. But if you're interested in attending, just let Joy know, because she's keeping track of who will be there. So thank you so much. Sorry for, well, appreciate the opportunity to break rules and not getting into big trouble.
Beautiful.
As a reminder, there'll be an opportunity after Paul finishes to do some small group conversations to delve more deeply into each of these topics. Paul.
Thanks, Sally. I think Sally will probably throw the cards at me if I go over it on the. Oh, slow down. She has a slow down on as well. I have a tendency to talk really fast. If you saw that last RFA presentation, even my wife, who was here in the office, told me to slow down. So grant process is great. Not probably a big surprise that we're putting this on the board, but we wanted the next slide. I want to start off with some grant milestones. This was a fascinating dive for me in going into our history. So you can see it's not a big timeline. It's 11 years. So 2012 is when the House Bill 4165 developed the Youth Development Council. And then we moved through a couple stages with the division and the inaugural community investment grants and strategies. And then you notice that we jump up to 2019. So we went quite a few years with kind of a lot of work happening around community investment. 2019 is when the SSA and the statewide youth re-engagement system was born with House Bill 3427. What that did is it actually doubled the size of our grants team, as well as had about 2/3 more budget to it. We had about $8 million biannually to our budget. Within that,
And then, so that's when I came on board and we continued to move through that sequence. I did not put the date up there, but 2022 is when Senate Bill 1545 was passed, and that added Future Ready, which is the limited duration funds, and added about 7 million biennium grant funds there as well. So we've almost doubled, or we have doubled the size of our grant staff, almost doubled the size of our grant funding since 2019. Brings us to 2023, where we are issuing almost $30 million in grants across the state. Next slide, please. This is a slide that I found incredibly interesting. I did not include the first 1 year grant cycle that was included with CI. The CI has had six biennial grants, 5 of which were 2-year cycles. Pardon me. CI, community investment. Sorry about that. Thanks for the acronyms there. But I highlighted kind of the important numbers. You can see community investment. We were about a 75% award rate back in 2015-17. If you jump to 2023-25, we're at a 29% award rate. It was a shocking number to me as we went through it. And also included up there is the re-engagement. So our first round of re-engagement, we were about 100%. There's some little asterisks there because there's a whole bunch of variances within that. But of our opportunity grants, we were right about 100% funding there. And this last round jumped down to 67.4%. So obviously, some of the things we've been talking about is really demonstrated in this slide. So next slide, please. So one of the things I've had to learn joining from the school district is, well, what are the components of this whole grant process? So this slide just kind of breaks down RFA development. We have a couple areas that we have limited or it takes a lot of time to change in these components. So you can see the Oregon revised statutes and Oregon revised rules, or administrative rules, excuse me. Those are hard to change. That's what kind of drives the work. So for example, eligibility and re-engagement is under the statute and then further defined in administrative rules. We also, DOJ and ODE policy is one of those things that just is there. We can help change it, but it is one of those processes that's out there. The areas we have a larger influence in is the RFA materials. It's probably one of the categories we have the largest influence in what we've put out there. But then also like our community and grantee input, really important, right? And when we saw some changes along the lines with that. I put Youth Development Oregon because that's our staff, that's the council, all have influences in that process. And we've heard it, we saw it yesterday, the legislative influence the council can have around that work. And we've seen some increased grant funds because of that. Next slide, please. There's a lot on this slide, but all this slide is kind of to show, thank you, is that we have about a year-long process in the development of the RFA. This last go around, that went from community engagement into building it and moving forward. You'll notice that there is some overlap and there's obviously been some delays in our awarding processes and those things, but it still takes about a year for us to develop those RFA processes. This last go around, we didn't do any major changes. We did more alignment across all 3 of the RFAs. So if we were going to make some major changes, I would assume that timeline will increase. Next slide, please. All right, so that comes to this slide, which is my final slide. Look forward to discussion questions. We've talked a lot about continuous improvement, and there's kind of 4 large areas in this process that we can look at changing and improving along the way. I think every time we do an RFA, this happens, but we have the application process. Is that my timer, or is that a phone call? Timer? Oh, I was expecting the duck. Well, I'm gonna keep going. Audience broke the rules, I'm gonna break the rules. All right, so application. Sorry, I had to throw you under the bus. Application, that is, you can see those materials there. Evaluation is the process, the rubric, are pieces that we can control and look at improving. The award, which are award amounts, priorities on those pieces. And then lastly, post-award, which some of that is defined in the RFA, but it's still post-award. Now, one of the things I want to point out that's really important in this slide, once we publish that RFA, those are the rules we have to abide by for that entire process. And that's hard. So sometimes we do things in the RFA that we're like, still have to abide by it because that was what we published on that. So move to the next slide, please. So that puts us to our discussion questions. Good. All right. So our discussion questions, just to put into the group, considering those milestones and award, what critical needs and or concepts emerge
Oh, I can see it right there, that's awesome. How should YDO analyze and implement the different components within that RFA development? What key continuous improvement areas surface that we might need to consider during that time? And then how does YDO determine key priorities? Because we're gonna start that 2025, 27 cycle, sorry, grant managers, that's starting actually December 11th when we do the debrief of our last RFA process. That's it.
I'm just starting the timer on our conversation. All right, where shall we begin with this? What are the parts that really stood out? Where you thought, gosh, why do we do it that way? Can we change it? Here's what we should do.
Oh, sorry about that. Based on this last year's experience and the squeaky wheel, about one receiving multiple grants. I think the whole notion of the RFA, as you said, needs a little more scrutiny. We have to be really careful about what we put in and what we don't, and think about both geographical equity and just equity across organizations and performance and how we evaluate the best grantees. And that's just a huge spaghetti mess that we have to be careful with. In terms of excitement, I'm excited that we have future ready Oregon dollars, and I hope that we can keep them beyond the end of their time limitation.
A very pragmatic question. For the 2025 legislative session, when do things need to be turned in for decisions like what is the timeline? It just dawned on me.
So two timelines. One is for legislative concepts. Those are due December 1st. We are not planning to submit a legislative concept this time around. Of this, like, we have to submit it now a year ahead of time for next session. But I think we still have work to do implementing the last bill that we got through. And although it feels like we matter more when we have legislation that we ask for, there will probably be some bills that we need to pay attention to beyond stuff that we were putting forward. And I think, since I respected that 5-minute limit, as one of the more focused people who needs a limit, I didn't talk about the fact that we actually should be thinking about administrative rules as an opportunity from our legislature. We actually have some rule updates to do as a result of our statutory updates. That's a place where we can actually do some tangible things. So I think we would focus more on that instead of get more legislation. However, we may hear about things folks want us in on. We'll probably be added to a work group or two. This always happens. So we'll focus on that stuff when that comes up. Money, POPs, policy option packages, are due December 15th. Brian and I have been tossing around ideas for that. We have some things we want to ask for. We'd be happy to hear about things folks here want us to ask for. We're talking to the governor's office about what kind of reception we're going to get for our asks, and that is a big mystery right now. But we have some thoughts on that, and we're gonna put something together. The deadline is to tell ODE we have stuff. We are gonna actually do a placeholder LC in case we want to put a law together. Legislative concept. We'll have a placeholder if sometime between now and the spring, summer, we actually realize, oh, we want to ask for some legislation. But we'll put together a POP and say we want, I'm thinking like $12 million in total. And we have to basically tell the story of what we're going to do with that. And that, I think, is a whole bunch of different things. So happy to talk more about that in the discussion time. Come to my table.
Perfect plug.
I like everyone you asked a question. Can you go back a couple of slides for me on distribution history? One more. One more. Right there.
So, so my question is, and this is just a question that it will be a conversation. You know, we started yesterday talking about our mission, our vision, our values, blah, 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 and, you know, we've been maneuvering around. Dotting. So as, I look at, you know, 2015, thinking about, we use language, community engagement, blah, 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 all this stuff, right? Sorry to be so ambiguous, but I think we have to learn. So then here we are, 2023, 2025, and I'm looking at that distribution of awarded. Is that in alignment with our objectives, mission, vision? Do we stake what percentage, probably that's probably biased in some way, of where we want to distribute, or do we just feel, hey, this disaggregated categories equally support what we're saying as a council? Does that sound crazy, or is that not clear? I'm just asking, I'm looking at the percentages, and maybe it's because, of course, 29% for one, because there's so many and so much, right? But I'm not advocating for any, I'm just asking a question. And that's to the whole room.
Maybe if people want to try to answer that question, or it's a question we can put down. I'm not gonna answer
I'm
it.
not gonna answer, I have
I could.
a comment.
I think if I understand, Judy, what you're asking, the allocation across those different programs is dependent on how much money we get from different funding sources. And so we have to use the money that we get to the best of our ability to reach the vision and mission. And what we try and do as a council is to increase the funding pots that give us the most flexibility to actually get the outcomes we want.
And we never know, like that year, 2019 to 2021, we had a lot of conversation about having 100% of what, you know, we just don't know how things are gonna fall until you get it, and then you see, wow, we had a big response this year. My comment on all of this is it's really interesting, and also I think though the missing component is what else is happening in the world. Like we've had changes in who our director is, we've had changes in the governor, we've had changes in what the state priorities are, we had COVID. So there were so many things that we were responding to throughout the time, and I really appreciate changes don't happen quickly. It takes a while for us to think about what we want and get through all those different aspects of rulemaking. When I think about where we're at right now, understanding that we're coming off of COVID and understanding that there has been this massive influx of federal funds that have hit schools. My son's school has like 4 positions right now that are incredible, counseling and student support and all these additional programs. And they're all going away next year. Every school is having massive layoffs next year. And a lot of student support services that are really critical are all gonna disappear next year. And so I just think, as we think about what we want, being really cognizant about the greater context is really important, and that students are going to see a huge reduction in services. This is our last fiscal year that we've got that federal cash, and it's not gonna be around going forward, so.
Hey, everybody, can you hear me okay? Oh, great, okay. Well, I just had a kind of a comment and question kind of combo on the emerging needs and concepts. One of the best things, I think, at least from a grantee perspective about grant opportunities coming out of YDD is the flexibility, especially those general funds grants. So not specifically the Future Ready, of course, but those general funds grants that really allowed us to be really agile and quick and wrap around youth needs, in terms of direct support or wraparound support, educational support, whatever they needed, we had it. And it's really a tremendous thing. And I think it's a rarity. So thank you all for that work. But there's also this really big hurdle for us, especially as a small workforce board, but I see it at the community colleges. There's this, in these rural communities that we're serving, which is, the bulk of the state and certainly our entire service area for Northwest Oregon Works, but there's a real lack of infrastructure and there's a lack of institutional support in terms of services to youth. So, we contract some services with our federal funds, but for our YDD funds, we provide those services directly, and we're just able to do it much more responsively. So with all that in mind, there's this real need for capacity building for us as a grantee, historically, in terms of our OYEP funds and our YDD funds. And I'm wondering if there's any kind of eye to that towards the future in your planning about, grants that maybe aren't direct services for individual youth, but that provide kind of capacity building or to that end. My best example is there's virtually no transportation anywhere on the coast that's really reliable and robust for students to use. And the community colleges are all strapped. Like Clatsop is in a major financial hurting way. TBCC is really small and has just a general lack of resources. LBCC, their adult basic skills department is gone. They got rid of it. And these are the partners that we really rely on to reach youth most effectively, at least in my experience. So, grants that allowed us to build capacity in terms of, getting vehicles for shuttles or bringing more to the table for regional partnerships, but that also would serve kind of our ability to serve youth directly down the line are really the kind of golden goose. That was really long-winded. I'm sorry.
I know we don't have a ton of time doing that, so that's just, I think, helpful for the council and council members to hear about the flexibility, about the need and potential for those kind of capacity building grants. Little quick commercial, we just released our re-engagement collaborative grant. You may have seen that through your email, and that grant is focused on giving or selecting organizations to do convening and some more of that system building work. So the short answer is yes, and it's, I think, an important conversation for the council to have going, and for us as a staff to go into 25, 27 about the capacity related to Bill's presentation, data and research, et cetera. So 2.5 minutes left. Before I do this, are there people who haven't spoken or asked a question? Anybody who wants to chime in? And two, know that if you get your comments or questions up on a little sticky up there, we'll record them there. So, yeah.
My question is, especially with respect to the capacity building, is there an opportunity for partnerships with other entities that do that kind of work, whether it's extension or a community foundation or any other entity that can help in that arena, so that it's not, so that we're not trying to do it all.
Other thoughts?
I guess I just have a question. Having been both a grant writer as well as a grant reviewer, my question is twofold. Just curious what those that are applying for the grant, what they say about the application and answer the questions. Is it clear? And so that's one, but then as the grant reviewer, how are they receiving the answers? Are the grants actually answering the questions and getting at what it is that we really want to hear from them, since they're the ones directly working with the audience? So I'm curious on both sides.
I'm laughing because they said I want to drive one of those. Bonnie said I wouldn't be able to, so I'd be in trouble. But, so the short answer of that is that that is a piece that I think we need to look at as we move forward, right? That's one of those continuous improvement pieces. We implemented some new changes this year in the rubric and how that looks. Right, I told you, Tanya, I'd love to drive this, but, so I think that's the short answer of it. The feedback that I've gotten initially, we've not done the outreach when we're traveling, that's yet to come later this year, I believe. But the initial feedback I've had when I've met with applicants that requested feedback about their application, I've only heard really positive pieces about the system itself, right? Like application process, the questions. The one bit of feedback that I had is we put too many bullets. I think it's a classic, that's my writing stuff too, but you put too many bullets in a 300-word phrase, right? So that's some of the nitty gritty that we're gonna start working. I think the great question about the evaluators that I don't know the answer yet. That's gonna be coming.
I'll also add that what I would love to have been able to show on that slide is in a nutshell, how many we wish we funded, because to your question, there were some grants that weren't in very tight alignment with what YDO aims to do. And so I don't think we feel bad about not funding those, but that there were a lot of grantees who we funded in the past. We know the good work they do, and we didn't have enough funds to go around. And so I think that that's an important question to pose. We're gonna take a quick break to kind of reset the room in order to continue these conversations. And so what we'll do is we'll pull the parking lot, the big stickies, and kind of assign each one to a table so that if you wish, you can mill around, but if there's a conversation you really want to be part of, you have an opportunity to delve more deeply into it. So we continue the grants conversation at the grants table. Paul, is this your table? Great, so I'm gonna have this be the grants table. Bill, are you okay here? It's gonna be our data table. Anya, are you good? This being the Anya table? Okay. And Cord. How about this one that nobody else would, okay, and we're gonna have Cord right here. Sorry, we're gonna have Cord over here. Brian said so. Brian doesn't want to move that. Cord's gonna be where Jared is. But the idea being that we know that you have specific expertise, lived experience, important pieces to add to these conversations, and we want to be sure to capture them so that we can use this information moving forward as we build upon the work that we've done here over these past 2 days. Any questions, comments, thoughts? They go in the order. All right, let's plan on finding ourselves at a table in about 5 minutes, which depending on which clock you look at would be 12:39 or 12:40.
I'm sorry.
Yes. Everything said was, what you said was important to hear. I got the title. They're both slow. Like 3 or 4. Oh, it's not.
Yeah.
That if they know what was said.
Yeah, I'm gonna find one.
Yeah.
Log in. Have people.
Yeah. We gave extra time at it. So we're gonna give you a quick break. 5 minutes, stretch your legs. Sorry, if I go here, then. So 5 minutes, come back here, 1:39. On the right clock, which is 2 minutes behind. And then we will get into thinking ahead and next steps and so on and so forth. We're a little off schedule, but we want to give you more time and attention. There we go. It's 1:39. Right, here we go, here we go. Yes. Okay. But I have to be even louder. All right, Joy, here we go. I'm screaming to those of you online. Welcome back. Okay, here we go. I'm back. We're going to looking ahead and next steps. I don't know if folks have some sticky notes on your table. If not, we can come up with some more. And for those online, we're gonna do this kind of as a little self-reflection. I'm gonna give you 6 minutes or so to look at the questions on the board. What ideas from the past 2 days are resonating with you? What actions and strategies identified in the past 2 days feel urgent and important? What has surprised you? What questions are you walking out with? What should the staff and council do next to keep us moving forward? We're going to deal with those 5 bullets, and then we'll come back to this last question. But I just, rather than just popcorning around the room, it feels like I'm going to give you until 1:46, 6:47. I said 6 minutes to just think about those questions. You do not need to answer each of them, but pick 1 or 2 to think about and come up with an answer. And then we will go around the room and online to see what answers you have. Does everybody have a pen, sticky note, something to do your reflection? If you don't, there are some sticky pads up here. Pens can be found. All right. Around the room. I didn't tell you that part. You can pass. Did I say that? Right. Start back, so to speak. Somebody from that table. Molly, I'm looking at you. Here it comes.
I'm not sure that it surprised me. The information that Lawrence is joining our team again on December 11th is incredibly exciting to me. And then what surprised me, what I am walking out with is an invitation to everybody in the room to come to our juvenile justice table and to our SAG and our JCP table. And I'm interested into the why on the absence of that. And so that piece of it, there's been wonderful work lots of the cross bureaucracy, lots of amazing things, but I am walking out a little bit with the why. So the why on that at our the SAG feels like a lift to me. But that it was just Marcella and myself as council members sitting back to talk about the questions around the juvenile justice youth. And I don't mean that to think that the people aren't interested in it. I was just curious as to the why, that there wasn't more conversation around the juvenile justice involved youth.
I kind of came in late to this, but I wrote down, I like the idea of inviting more guests and especially having more youth involvement. Because for what I do in my job role, I think it would help me a lot to share what they would do justice. Such they can get through the process.
I think something that I kind of walk away with is, when we do this again or more often, this idea of having discussions and getting these ideas out, I'm coming away with the council. And I think I feel it more, I think after having discussions and hearing the thoughts, right, that our council members have, but they really want to know how they can better advocate and champion what the YDO is trying to do in serving organizations. That's kind of what I'm walking away with and kind of what's rolling around in my head. I didn't write anything. But I've been thinking this whole time. I want another rule to be broken. So a new one to be made. It just seems there's such a value in seeing each other in person and having this face-to-face communication and conversation, sometimes planned, sometimes just naturally evolving, happening. And I think it's really challenging, probably for people online to participate. So if we were to have a gathering like that, which I hope we will, and not too far away, not to even offer an online option, because it's sort of, I don't know. I understand there are some challenges in transportation and all kinds of things, but I think it kind of takes away both from their voices are not being heard here. Sorry. And I sometimes wonder if they're hearing what they're hearing because there's no response. So anyway, sorry. I'm reading.
I really appreciate being at Paul's table, hearing a lot more about grants. Made me think two things. Well, one, just hearing, I'm glad that what currently is the 9 sovereign nations, if they apply, they get the 10% or 10-point increase, 10%, but it's only the 9 sovereign nations and not any other Native American serving organization. And for me, that's an obstacle to the community because there are, NARA and NAA, so many that if they're not within that sovereign nation, they can't apply unless they partner, but they're doing so much work in communities that are in need that I definitely, for me, would love to see that be amended, even though it takes time. It's something for the longevity of this serving body. So to me, that's what I'm leaving with from that table. But what I'm also leaving with is it is nice to be in breakout groups. And I think of Zoom, we're always together as one and not having that separate, like if it is on Zoom, it's like, oh, I'd like to get into the weeds. He was surprised that we went into the weeds, but it was great because it helped me understand as a member, if I don't understand something, it's hard for me to chime in. So I want to know more, like even seeing the application, like it's kind of my language here. So that's like, oh, I see what they're seeing. I see what the reviewers are seeing or the applicant. So then I can, with your questions, I can better actually answer your questions and provide more input and feedback possibly. Maybe I can't, but at least having that background knowledge is so helpful. So whether it's in person but even if it's on Zoom, how can we find a space on Zoom to be in these micro communities to dive deeper in these different segments?
So I think for me, what feels like most urgent and important and something that kept coming up is like increased youth involvement. And I think, Molly brings a great point is, we wish we had more like interest or participation in the SAG. And so I think that's where like a lot of that youth involvement can happen, with SAG, with justice subcommittee, with the youth subcommittee. And I feel like we generated a lot of really great ideas how to increase involvement. And so I'm kind of just excited for like that next step, like let's implement those ideas.
The first one, what ideas from the past 2 days are resonating with you? I put down here partnering with existing entities to expand data capacity to tell the story of YDO impacts. So I was thinking about what Bill said earlier and about the importance of qualitative and quantitative data. And so I think there's some opportunities for partnerships where we get that qualitative data that really helps others understand what is going on with all these different funding streams, how they really impact real people, real young people, real families. So I'm thinking about that. And then what questions are you walking away with? One of them is, and somebody touched on this earlier, how do we tap into being in this room for the last 2 days, like there's so much expertise. I've learned so much about people that I've been seeing on video. Like how do we tap into ways that we can strengthen the work that the staff are doing, the council's doing, the community organizations that we're involved with are doing, and like what's the conduit for that? So, when you talked about how we had a council member who helped overcome a logjam, right? So that's just one example, but all of us have connections and ways we might be able to leverage that for the benefit of the mission of this group. So I don't know, I'm just thinking, how does that happen?
I really appreciated when we had the gentleman share who was a former or a current grantee. And I think I always really care about youth voice, but the thing that's resonating with me right now is just grantee voice. And, folks bring so much expertise. And I really appreciate when grantees share challenges, even more than when they share success stories, because I think it gives us this whole rich picture. So I think the thing that I'm really taking away from both me is just ways that we can authentically invite grantees to share their story, and more than just what's going well, like what's not working, what's really hard, what do you need to see in your community?
So much is swirling in my brain, but I think the two things I'll share, the question that I am walking away with is just very like logical, like applicable next step, like how are all of the ideas generated in conversations here going to flow into committees? Like I'm just eager to like get into that committee work, right? The thing that feels urgent and important, and I don't know if it's just because we just had this conversation around positioning YDO for the 2025 session, like how are we laying groundwork for that now? Just like some of that, because deadlines are fast approaching, like that feels urgent to me because there's some quickly approaching deadlines, and just however the council can be a support to that. And just thinking about, legislative session and all of the different moving pieces there.
So we do have someone, person who they can share.
Yeah.
Great.
What's
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Is this a good time? Okay, I think so. And interrupt me if someone's already sharing. I don't want to step on anyone's voice. So some of the key takeaways for me, as I was reflecting, I was able to spend more time yesterday in the meeting, and I apologize for missing most of the day today. But I also wrote these key takeaways in the chat as well. And I'll start with the first one is
and echoing what folks have shared before me, a collaboration with other agencies, grantees, experts on youth engagement, for both our opportunity youth and youth that have been involved in the justice system. And I think Molly had lifted that up a bit earlier too. So thinking about how we're increasing youth voice and feedback in programs and services, that'll help us with better understanding the different needs and gaps. And then what changes and adaptations we might need to make to improve access and support. The second piece I also wanted to lift up is just opportunities to enhance our communication and transparency and feedback loops around process and timeline. That's going to be critical for our agency partners and our grantees. And I think that, especially in light with all of the leadership transition we've seen in the legislature, transition in the governor's office, there's going to be a need to continue to double down on our communication and support, because there's a lot of new people and new roles, and that turnover and the need to continue to strengthen that partnership is going to be critical as we move forward together. And then the last piece I wanted to lift up, and this was talked about a lot in our small group discussions, was around, how do we continue to strengthen partnerships and pursue grant opportunities around wraparound services and supports? And then also just trying to make sure that those grant opportunities aren't in silos, but where they can be integrated, there are opportunities to braid. I'd love eventually, I don't know if this is feasible or possible, to see a common application, right, for grants, so that grantees don't have to apply for like 10, 20, 15 smaller grants, but be great to be able to figure out how to streamline that. I know that's a very optimistic view, especially because each grant will often have its own set of statutes and rules in some cases. But if that's something we can work towards and work to improve how we talk about it and help our grantees apply for a variety of sources of funding, that'll be really valuable moving forward. And I think considering the conversations we've had around current service level and the inflationary costs that everyone has been experiencing, right? Just thinking about how do we do this in a more sustainable way moving forward. And that's it for me.
No, I'm good.
We'll keep this moving, because I know.
Thank you. I guess the thing that I'm taking away, or that I'm thinking about as next steps, are really just that, someone, I think it was those mentions, the practical piece of, how do we move forward from all of the brainstorming and great ideas and taking those stickers maybe and prioritizing and really thinking about what are the must-dos of staff as an agency and what's left, and then picking your key 1-2 goals for this year. And because I think there are so many things that are valuable and worthwhile, but it's hard to be divided into so many different things. Just consider focusing and coalescing around some very key goals, and how do we engage the passion and energy around really focusing on those, and what are, breaking out, what are those small steps to get there, that planning piece. But I don't know, that's not that exciting, but the idea of just kind of trying to not overwhelm yourselves and as both a council and a staff, just to really think about priorities and focus and then building that foundation. And it seems like there are a few key areas that people have talked about. That's nice. You know,
I was just really encouraged by the just the interactions of this team and the people, you know, here and contributions, and look forward to synthesizing those and seeing what we come up with.
So I think, well, I guess I really shouldn't be surprised. Something that I noticed was just everyone's openness to new ideas and willingness to have discussions. And I think, yeah, these discussions are really interesting. I think is explored a lot of different ideas that normally we don't get to hear. And I'd definitely be open to more of them. Also, I liked the idea of going to where the youth are. I mean, I'm lucky I have a mom who puts up with driving me an hour there and back, but you know, a lot of people we're trying to serve, you know, might not have those kinds of opportunities to get involved. So I think that it's a good idea to just go to where our youth are already going.
I'm gonna answer the question, what questions are you walking out with? And my question that I'm walking out with is, what am I gonna do next? All the presentations were super fascinating, lots of things that I have learned, and that I would like to continue learning about. That's why I stayed at this table for the whole time. Sorry, SAG, and sorry, all the other groups. I was just learning so much, I didn't want to stop. Yeah, it's more kind of this overwhelming feeling of, okay, now what? I want to help everywhere, but I really do need to kind of pick one area and help there. And what area is that going to be?
Yeah, I'm really impressed that so many great ideas in these 2 days. And there's so many attendees realize that they put the same priority, like increase youth voice, and they also so many people realize that the mental health causes so many other problems, is the cause of so many other problems. So I see a lot of people think that should be put on higher priority. And also just thoughts that it's great that YDO can start doing more marketing about itself that people know. Like, I like the ideas that you bring the guests. Also, I just thought maybe, so I think we just have a very simple website. I don't know whether we have social media. We don't even make it complicated. I think every time I see those grantee highlights, it's so I feel so passionate and so touching. Even just put those in our social media, that's a great advertisement. I'm in the board of a small organization. Sometimes our the picture and the video I put there has 40,000 viewers. You can't believe that, because people like to see those. They don't like see a boring those posts, but if we have so many of those already, we can just put those clips there. That's would be like, just show itself. Like, I think maybe that's something we can do. Yeah, so. Yeah, so that's my viewpoint.
So I'm not gonna actually read what I wrote because I changed it, hearing everybody talk about it. But I think one of the things that I'm walking away with is just the re-energized focus on the work, right? It was fun to go into the weeds about grant making, which was fun. I realized it went 20 minutes in, I'm like, we are so far in the weeds, it's not even, but it was fun to engage in that conversation. And I think it is one of those things that it can be really impactful as we continue to impact this work. And I just never know about meetings. I'm a lot myself, and coming and enjoying this meeting has really been a really, I think, reaffirming time in general. So, yeah, if you want to hear somebody else talk,
Yeah.
I think for me, it's more about something surprising that came up during the lightning conversations. About the fact that there were several programs next year that's gonna be taken out of functioning, and it just made me really concerned because it's very easy to start with a youth, and if you start with them, it's follow through that keeps them kind of consistent. And if we don't have that consistency with them, then what's gonna happen? At the end of the day, it's still gonna come back to us and what we're doing. So I guess one of the questions I was just curious about is there any way the work we're doing can help like prevent that? Or is there anything like even with our grants, how can it help us stop all this really useful youth programs from being taken off?
Yeah, thanks, sir, for coming into this late. I think the thing that I'm walking away here, thinking about last night and then thinking about today is how can council members be put to their highest use with the limited amount of time that they can devote to it. And I think about all of the grant monies that we put out there, they're not enough, they're never gonna be enough. But we want to stretch them, leverage them, and use them to their greatest use, and I think council members are the same. How do we encourage each other, and how do we get ourselves to figure out what the best use of our limited time is? And that won't be the same for everyone in the room. But the consequences of our impact are high. So it's a great return on investment in terms of the time we can devote.
For me, I loved hearing the conversation around partnerships and what it looks like to collaborate, to collect the existing resources and research, and then to be able to synthesize that and do storytelling to better amplify what YDO is and does, and to be able to highlight what council members can do to keep YDO kind of top of mind for the folks for whom we can really make a big difference. So the question that I'm left with is, how can we better support folks who we know we want on the council? So we would talk a lot about youth, but then also when I think about our tribal communities, how can we better support their participation on the council? And that feels like something that staff and existing council members can kind of work through. What does it look like for us to better support youth and other voices that aren't currently at the council table, recognizing that if we're missing Andy right now, and that there's only one Andy, and if Andy weren't alone and there were other voices that represented the tribes, might we have concluded different things today or yesterday?
Wow, this is powerful stuff. And I hate hearing my voice in the microphone. I don't know about everyone else, but I think the thing that I'm walking out wondering kind of adds on to Celeste's point about how do we bring in more grantee voice. And I was thinking that, on a smaller scale, we've done events like this with the re-engagement team. We've had re-engagement convenings, and so we brought all of our re-engagement grantees together as sort of a professional learning opportunity to share those challenges and best practices. And it's kind of easier to do that on a smaller scale of re-engagement because it's a new program, kind of, learn how, as we're kind of, building the program and learning the ropes. But how do we do that with all of our grantees? So this year we're going to be adding, the Future Ready grantees, workforce grantees, doing those conversations with more. And I'm just thinking, how do we bring in, our entire scope of grantees? Now, granted, we have a lot of grantees, so that would be pretty large event, but maybe heavy lift. But just thinking, how do we really bring in that grantee voice more? And I think also not just to hear their perspectives, but to sort of demystify what we do. Because so often they look to us and they just think, oh, bureaucratic, and they don't necessarily know why certain things happen the way they do or why we do things the way we do. And just being able to converse like we've done here and just make it clear why things might take as long as they do, or how we make certain decisions, and just kind of demystifying our processes and bringing them in on that so they understand what we do a little bit better.
I like the spike. I think it sounds really good. You sounded good on it. I used to do a radio show. You're listening to the French on KRBS. So brings back memories. I think I'm answering maybe question 3, but what surprised me, and maybe it's more just some things I learned about just in this last conversation, and this is maybe an answer, Molly, to your question. We had a lot of the discussion at the statutes and policy table was about juvenile justice involved youth. And I think that what I am now really curious to learn more about is where we might fit in this, what I'm understanding is a big gap in services for young people around Measure 110, where we've had, actually was noted in our strategic plan notes from 2 years ago. And there wasn't even a clear goal. It was like, be at policy tables. And I don't even think we were really at those tables. We're starting to be, and we're talking with ADPC and Emily Stolf. We're trying to get to representative Conrad's table. Alcohol and Drug Policy Council, which was recently has become sort of semi-independent from OHA in a way similar to Youth Development Division. So we have some affinity there, but I think we have some collaboration to do around that. And so just kind of thinking about places that our work needs to go or could go that I haven't really pondered is something I'm walking out with. I have a next step thing that I'm going to talk about, but I'm saving it for the slide that I have coming up, and I'm passing them.
Thank you. I'm going to start out with the 2 things that surprised me, and one of them is pretty politically incorrect, so I'm just going to go ahead and break rules right now. The first is just learning, 2 things. The challenge of working within ODE as a much larger parent organization and with a much larger budget. It's got pros. You can kind of squeak money into it, and it's just budget dust, as they say. But it's also really challenging because you don't get as much attention from the legislature and don't have as much understanding as to the role that the youth development vision really plays in life, youth and families. And the turfiness that it comes about both in terms of fundraising, working with potential other partners, funding partners, data turfiness. That's so unfortunate. It makes me really sad. The other is the fact that with respect to youth workforce and the fact that grants end at the end of a biennium, there's a funding cliff, and then there's no youth workforce program in the summer because there's no money yet, maybe until September or October. That's stupid. So how do we address that? And Jeff had a really novel idea, I guess they've used already in other places, and trying to recruit matching funds from private entities and using a repository like the Oregon Community Foundation to hold those funds and to generate match, and maybe that match can be used for that period of time so we don't have programs lapsing. So those are great ideas. What seems most urgent and important to me is, again, a legislative education on the youth and family-centered grant making. The division does as upstream substance use prevention and youth re-engagement. These conversations are going on all over the place in terms of youth mental health and youth resilience. this particular part of state government, even youth development division, is so well positioned to address so much of this, along with all the community-based partners, and deliver it in a way that is culturally sensitive and appropriate. I think that it's the right time to really step up and try and get the word out.
Right. 2:18, we're getting near, so, my takeaways are, you've said them all, so I don't know that I need to say anything other than, we should talk about, there's a real interest in hearing what comes next. So, with that, I'll tell you both literally, because we have a couple of timeline slides that we want to show you. So Joy, could you advance, and Court, you and I can kind of do this together. Maybe you do this one and I do the next one or something, but yeah, Joy, stay there. But I want to say at the bottom of that previous slide, there was a question. So maybe Joy, go back one, that after we go through the next slide and the slide after that, I actually do want to come back to that. And I kind of think maybe we'll end with you all talking, maybe not at your full table, but just maybe to the person next to you about how do we intentionally involve stakeholders who are members of the communities affected by our work and prioritizing what we have identified. Just have a maybe one or two, if it makes sense, the three of you, I'm not going to get in the weeds. We'll put the slide up so that you can have that just one-to-one, two or three of you, if necessary, conversation, just so that it informs again how we go forward. So keep that just in the back of your head. We'll come back to it. We're not going to forget it. For example, not at our December meeting, but I think at our March meeting, I'm going to ask you all to bring a guest. So a person under 28. So just now, you've been told. March. We don't, going into McLaren, that'd be a whole thing that we don't want to surprise them with, or the guests. So, but you will have a chance to have some deeper conversation in just a few minutes. Joy, if you'll go ahead. Court, do you want to do this one? You do the detailed one? Sound good. Okay. So you're asking about next steps and what comes next. We have kind of big picture. We shared this timeline. Let me go on front here. At the September meeting, and we've since tweaked it a little bit, but just to make sure you all see, and I'll say this out loud, we will send this full PowerPoint deck in the next few days out to you all. So for those who had to come in and out or weren't here yesterday, you at least can see a lot of the content that we developed. You've seen probably bits and pieces of it, obviously, we've gone through, but so just know that you'll get this, and you don't have to take a ton of notes. But we've referred to the fact that the new governor had some expectations around a strategic plan. We had sort of waffled a little, like, should we try to get our a new strategic plan completed, excuse me, by June, end of June next, end of June in 2024. We weren't sure whether we could do that. Long story short, we're going to submit our current plan 21-23 as the way to check the box, so to speak, on, hey, we have a plan, we've been working it, we'll get it in by the end of this calendar year. That will give us more runway to complete a 24-26 or a 24-27 plan, so that we can get that done, let's say in the summer or fall of 2024. So this is the beginning of developing that plan. So we will meet the expectation that we need to meet. There's a questionnaire that we need to complete. We'll do so by the end of this calendar year to say, yes, we've done a strategic plan. There are some agencies that don't have an active plan, haven't done planning, et cetera, et cetera. I guess I've said all this allows us expanded time to develop our next plan into 24. We will
we're thinking into 2024, we'll probably want to get you all back together. Maybe it's in the afternoon of that March quarterly meeting or somewhere in relation to it, or maybe it's in the following month. We'll dive into that. We're gonna bring some guests, don't forget, but we'll organize some kind of retreat or meeting format in the spring to get us moving into more actual plan development. This has been like setting the stage, kind of creating the conditions to create that plan. We want to do some community engagement related to that plan. That's in some ways related to that question that's on the previous slide. So if you have ideas about stakeholder engagement, we also just generally want to do, how do we stay in communication with our grantees and with the communities across the state and in the 9 federally recognized tribes. Some of it, in advance of the RFA. So that's a summer, maybe probably fall project. Summer's not great in some respects with people travels and all sorts of stuff. Fall can be tough with the start of school year, but we'll figure it out. And then in terms of a completed plan, looks like, so next fall, we'll look to actually having that 25 to 27 plan really developed and approved, let's just say, in maybe by next year in the September meetings, we'll say, here we are, let's approve, let's go forward. So that's the big picture overarching timeframe. You've seen bits and pieces of this, but that's gives you kind of the framework for that. Any questions? Cord, team, anything that I missed? Celeste?
I was just wondering for the March-April retreat to draft the plan, are you about that being staff retreat? Is that something that you might have to staff? Who knows yet? Okay.
I'm not exactly sure. I don't know. I think my gut is that that's some kind of combined both staff and council. I don't know if it's literally draft the plan, but bring us together in some ways to get into more of that strategies and actions that we still might need to actually put down on paper. But I imagine it's all of us. It's hopefully not, maybe it's not all like a 2-day thing, but maybe it's like in the afternoon of the quarterly meeting or something to that effect. I don't know, Cord or others if they have ideas.
So I should have updated this slide after I wrote the next slide.
Oh.
Do you want to go? Because I think I answered some of those questions and probably contradict some things on here. So Brian and I were on the phone and I was writing that last one, but then last night I was like, I'm gonna put the real timeline in here and try to actually give more clarity to some of the things that were asked, like when will you literally give us back a document that captures all the things that happen here and things like that. So this is based on the timeline that we've been sharing. As Brian mentioned, we've shifted things around. So this December, we're planning to submit our current plan. You'll probably notice something interesting about the dates there. I'll talk about that in a second. Our current plan will be going to the governor's office to meet that deadline. What we learned in talking with the person who is coordinating that work, that governor's expectation work, is that they just want to see agencies are strategic planning. And they're not going to go and check and say, well, are you doing, if you achieve these goals, or does it, they want to see it has the components. If you've already done one, they want to see it and know that you're doing a new one. And so we also were told the date. We thought our plan was too old, and then we got updated information, and our current plan is actually within the period of time that it's valid. So we're going to submit it and continue this work and take the time it takes to do this work well. So between December and February, the plan is to provide an update to the council on this retreat in the December meeting for folks who haven't been able to participate, to hopefully give you at least a beginning of the feedback from what we've generated here. But I think that work is going to be ongoing. We've got a lot more happened today, and there's going to be a lot of thought in terms of turning that into something that is useful and makes sense that folks can then take and reflect on, and we can use that going forward. Something that occurred to me as I was doing this timeline was that we're not really going to be able to finish this in 2024. It will finish at the end of 2024. And I was like, well, is it really a 2024 strategic plan if we don't finish it and actually adopted until December of 2024. And then I thought, well, you know, we have that whole list of things we haven't yet achieved. Some of them are still kind of in the works. So maybe if you start thinking about the plan we have as one that really we still have time to finish some steps, that work doesn't have to just get put off for another year, but those are, we can say, what among the stuff that people have said we really need to do this, can we actually tackle alongside the planning work? And if you think of it that way, it becomes a 21 to 24 plan. And in 2024, we write the 25 to 28 plan. And in 2028, we write the 29 to 33 plan. I hope we're all here to do that, those of us who aren't turned off. In March or April, as Brian said, planning to come back together. And ahead of that, my expectation is that there will be something generated, materials that everyone, council and staff will have that gives us the starting point for the work on actually building the plan strategies for the future. The hope would be that by May we'd have a draft strategic plan so we can begin engagement and give ourselves, when I was thinking about it, I was like, let's just give ourselves a lot of time for the engagement because that question came up in the Policy Rules and Research Committee, like 1 month for community engagement, you're not gonna get it done. And that resonated with us. We're like, yeah, that doesn't really feel like we're doing it right. And so this timeline, we're just thinking, let's assume that is going to take us a few months to do well, and then give ourselves time to synthesize that into some final plan that we can, can update the council in September on that, and then hopefully by December we've got something really good that we can have final adoption of, and then in 2025 we start the work. So that's kind of where I'm thinking. This was what I thought about 11:45 last night. At the same time, I think Anya, you were also having epiphanies, so it was a fertile time for us to like have new ideas. So yeah, so it was the energy was there. So this is the current iteration, and we'll be sharing this, and then as soon as we can figure out how we're going to share out the documentation of what's happened these 2 days, we'll update goals. And I think that's all I'm to say. I'll pass it back to Brian.
Any questions? Does that help clarify the what happens next stuff? Okay. All right. Well, now, Joy, if you don't mind, I think we're gonna go back. A couple more back to that one with that right there. I mean, this is how I love to kind of have us end. Just take a deep breath. If you need to stand up and do so, but this is an opportunity just to talk to the person next to you, the person across from you. How do we intentionally involve stakeholders and members of the communities affected by work and prioritizing what you identified, or in engaging around a plan? Like, don't just have that conversation among a couple folks. I will ask you to come back. I'm not gonna pass the mic around the room just because I don't think we may not need that much time. I think it's just if there are any highlights that one of your dyads or triads wants to share, you can do that. And that will, once we've done that, I'll give you, I don't know, how much time do we need? 8 minutes, yes, 8 minutes. Don't worry, we will tell you when your 8 minutes is done. 4 minutes per person. If you're in 3, then somebody else needs to do that. 2 hours, 2 minutes, and 2.75 maybe. All right, so find a person next to you. You want to walk across the room, find another person you haven't spoken to all day, just have at it. I didn't know. Yeah, you can mix up staff and council, that'd be great. Or just black, or just the importance. Yeah, sure. Awesome, Lindsay, thank you.
Yeah, make me out with you.
Oh, that's good.
I mean, there was an idea that came up yesterday that I thought was really interesting. That, so Christina McMahon was talking about the fact that a lot of young people like maybe put off from being on a council because they don't want, like, all the meetings, like, you're kind of in the spotlight. But particularly for justice involved youth, or any kid that just sort of feels vulnerable to their identity that like may not actually want to sign up for this kind of role. And creating more informal spaces for conversation with people where it's not public meetings, where you're not, responsible for being on the council. It's actually a way that we could that could lead to someone wanting to be a youth council member, but it's a way to include kids who might feel like the big commitment doesn't work well.
Yeah, I completely agree with that because when we had just started like the youth members gathering that week, I could very much see that one of the things they appreciated was that it was very informal. It was not like too structured. They felt comfortable like actually sharing their stories, especially like, you're in the system and, not everybody might feel comfortable with it, like, public, being out there.
Yeah.
But I think we're kind of still like moving on to make it like an official council, which I understand because of all the rules about like, we have to have a council involved, but I just think having that informal space is always much better for them to feel, because I think we hear more stories that even when we had the spotlight and I can remember there was Wharton Dairy Farms, I couldn't see one of them actually being one of them. Yeah, I don't know if you remember.
I remember it was a young woman who was like really shy.
Put her face on video. I mean, it's understandable. Not everybody is comfortable with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, it's easy when you're kind of used to this stuff to like just the expectations of the council and adultness and, just the way that which functions.
Question or theme, and what's resonating for me is those positive factors, the protective factors, and a convening of grantees and how the different ways all of our grantees provide protective factors for youth and their families, and then invite folks from, again, ODE, OHA, ODHS, legislators, and have some opportunity for discussion too, so people can really learn from one another.
Anyone else? Deep breath. Coming to the end, but this is maybe just the beginning. I think we want to do a photo. Yeah, so group photo, I think we want to do a staff photo. Is anybody taking 80 photos all day? I feel liability challenge. Julia's not here from procurement though, so I think the answer is yes. Risk, reward. Let's do it. Yeah, we will gather.
Thank you slide on this.
Hi. Let's gather.
Those are online.
Yes. Oh, wait, that's, so the idea would be that the folks online.
So well, there's, if they want their. Like this guy.
On the computer.
Yes. Yeah, so it'd be.
I can't see. Is Molly up there too? Okay, so we're gonna gather on that end. That's what I'm hearing.
Do we have the other folks?
Oh, yeah. Yes. We're gonna turn off. So start, so thank you first. Thank you, everybody. Give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you. Gather on that end. We're gonna turn off some computers. We're gonna have Parsa and is that Molly? You're gonna be in the photo. And then the pyramid's gonna be in front of you. Now you're gonna, Christina's gonna be on top. All right. That way. And that way, yes. In front of that screen, but you can't block that screen. Let's get you the picture. But we want you. I want you in the photo. Yes. Please. Thank you in the photo too. One, two, three.
Hi, Parisa. I just want to say thank you, and you can go ahead and log off. Molly, please stay on because we're going to take a staff photo. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Oh, that was all recorded, I think.